I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share the psychological aspects of legal cases. We have been covering the Chloe Driver case. This is a very difficult case, and right now they are doing closing statements. We are going to catch up because I got a great question about the MMPI that I didn't answer on this morning's stream. So I have a link to all of my previous coverage down in the description. And so please, if you missed any of the other coverage and you wanted to catch up, you can feel free to catch up down there. Yeah. All right. So closing arguments just finished. Okay. Yep. So we are going to start with the MMPI because I skipped this portion this morning. If there are general questions, please let me know, but let's listen to this right here because the defense did not ask her about the MMPI. This is Dr. Y'all know me in names, Dr. Roberta Ballard. This is Dr. Ballard. And the defense did not ask her about the MMPI results. And I think I know why. But I think it would have been better if the defense had asked, because them not asking opened the door for the prosecution. So, but yeah.
Used a diagnostic or to the best of his ability, objective thing to see if the defendant was malingering or there were issues with her self-reporting or her assessments, right?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about this because the defense didn't ask you about this. But in your report, you used something to test her evaluation or her answers by using something called the MMPI-2-RF, right?
Yes.
And that is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2 restructure form, right?
Right.
That is a 338 true-false test or inventory that is, in this case, the defendant could take to answer certain questions, right?
Right.
Because her evaluation or that thing itself is a self-reporting instrument or self-reporting procedure in many ways, correct?
Right, because she fills it out true or false.
And you did this to see if it had any correspondence to the validity of her scores or her testing, right?
I did what?
You gave her this test to see if she was malingering or if there was any issues with the validity of her test, right?
Of her test?
Of her.
So that's where his question, it's not a great question because his question is, did she administer this as a test of malingering or feigning symptoms? And that's not true. She gave it as an assessment of personality. Now, I think Chloe scored high on one of the validity scores, which I don't think she used these results as part of her ultimate conclusion because of the way Chloe's response style was more of a cry for help, or it was an over-reporting of symptoms.
Evaluation.
Oh, evaluation. I mean, that wasn't the only reason. The MMPI is, it measures like psychopathology, like symptoms, because it asks a lot about symptoms, but it also measures kind of more stable personality traits. So the only reason to give it it's not a malingering test. There are specific malingering tests you can give. This isn't.
You didn't use those tests, right? Malingering tests.
Right.
You chose not to use the malingering.
In this case, her self-report was so consistent with all the other sources of information that they did not use a malingering test.
But she has some over-endorsement of symptoms, right?
Yes.
In fact, you said Ms. Driver produced an invalid MMPI-2-RF profile due to over-endorsement of symptoms, right?
Yes.
And you agree with me that under the MMPI, the manual and the testing itself, that there is a F-R, which is infrequent responses measure, and then you put PF-R, but I think that's actually FP-R, right?
Oh, probably.
And I do typos all the time, but
yeah.
There's two categories. There's F-R and PF-R, right?
Yes.
And you gave a score of 120 for the F-R and 99 for the PF-R, right?
I didn't give it. That's a score sheet earned.
Right.
Yeah.
And you agree with me that the MMPI has a kind of a scale that if there is a scale for the F-R that's 79 to 99, that there's a possible motivated response.
Possibly, but you'd never interpret test results without looking at all the other information about the case. So yeah, possibly.
And under the MMPI, if there is a score that's above 100 for the F-R, that it's not possible a motivated response or helping out. It is a motivated response, right?
Say that again, sorry.
All right. Under the MMPI, whether or not someone's helping themselves out or motivating their answers or giving these type of answers, to test the validity, there's a range. 77 to 99, if it's in that range, it's possible that they gave a motivated response, right?
Okay.
Then there's another range, if it's 100 or above, in this case, hers is 120, that it is motivated.
I'm interested in your source for that.
Judgment approach?
Yes.
I'm going to fast forward through this part because it's going to give a range. And so I'm just going to let this play.
What I'm stuck on is that the MMPI.
Well, doctor, let me do it this way.
This is someone's take on it, but the reason why I'm stuck is because the MMPI doesn't tend to talk in terms of definite. So when you say something's definitely the case, that's not usually how we interpret MMPIs.
Let me put it this way. You agree with me that her scores are high
Yes.
and that they are above normal or abnormal, right?
Yes.
So you agree with me that maybe not you, but another psychologist could look at her scores and say, yeah, she was trying too hard, right?
Although they might have, it would be inconsistent with all the other sources of information. So they might decide that in all those other places, she was really not trying hard. She was presenting as herself, but in this place, she decided to, exaggerate or something. So
answering my question is yes, someone could disagree.
Someone could, yeah, sure.
Judgment approach.
Yes.
Am I gonna give it
No. Here.
And the same thing was true with her. You put PF-R, but FP-R.
Yeah.
So there are two, you agree with me that there were two things on some diagnostic where she was scoring abnormally high, right?
She scored invalid. Yeah.
All right,
I can explain what that means well, never mind, sorry.
Nope. By all means, if you want to explain, go ahead.
The MMPI has validity scales and then it has clinical scales. And you don't look at the clinical scales like the depression scale or whatever, unless you make sure that the validity scales are okay. In other words, they took the test without trying to fake good or fake bad or anything. So I didn't interpret any of her clinical scales because her validity scales were all that she over-reported symptoms. And so one possibility for that is if somebody isn't a great reader and they misunderstand items, that they could end up reporting things. And I felt like that probably didn't explain it for her because she reads, you only need to read like an elementary school level for this test. Another possibility is that she was faking and like trying to report a whole bunch of symptoms like in a lying kind of way. And that's possible, like I just said, but she wasn't in every other like interview with me, with other people, and all the other information from police, from witnesses, there wasn't that lying present. So the third possibility for that invalid score is that she is continuing to experience psychotic symptoms and it's called a cry for help is the third option for being invalid, is that you're in distress and you're just endorsing everything because it's like you're in distress, you want help. So you're just like, yeah, like to everything.
And so Duping the Light asked a question. I don't love the MMPI because it makes this true or false. Like you have to answer every question true or false. I like the personality assessment inventory. It gives more, excuse me. It gives more options. That's the one that I personally use. It's false, sometimes true, mostly true, very true. And most personality tests, if not all of them, have validity scales. And what she's talking about is that the validity scales, there was a red flag or there was like a, hey, watch out for this, that this profile might not be valid because she is over, because she endorsed things that even people in psychiatric populate, like even people with like severe mental health generally don't endorse. Now, sometimes people in forensic settings, people that are being assessed for not guilty by reason of insanity, sometimes they do give an invalid scale because there is a secondary gain of like they are trying to say, yes, I'm in distress. She interpreted it as a cry for help. It could also be seen that the individual could be exaggerating some symptoms. So I prefer a different test. Yeah, yes. And then this is how I talk all the time. I love breaking things down this way. And so that's why to me, especially somebody with borderline personality disorder. So I tried to research if flagging validity scales was common with borderline person, and I didn't see just in that quick search, I wasn't able to find anything, but it kind of makes people say yes or no. Yes, because there might be saying like sometimes, it's not all the time, or yes, this happened years ago. I don't know. Like, so that's where I don't like the MMPI. I had to take it, I think, 2 or 3 times in graduate school because we had to give it to each other so we could interpret it. And yeah, I'm not a fan of it personally. So I hope that was helpful. We wanted to break down that part, and then we are going to get to today's testimony because today started out with the judge explaining the fact that there is a third evaluator. Doo, doo, doo. Y'all. So there was a third evaluator that is about to testify that is a neutral evaluator. So let's hear the judge describe this. We are on 1.25 speed. I will slow it down if we need to. Let's go from here.
So, Dr. you can come forward.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I miss that part? I saw it over on, okay, so the judge was talking. Uh-oh. Maybe Court TV cut this part out. Let me see. Let me see if Court TV cut this part out. Let's see. I might get it over on Law and Crime if they cut it out. Because I'm not hearing it yet. Okay.
Good morning.
They got it.
Ms. Trethewey, you may call your next witness, please.
Judge, at this time, the defense will rest.
All right, thank you. Members of the jury, the state and the defense have closed their cases in chief. Georgia law provides that when a defendant has raised a defense of not guilty by reason of insanity, the law provides that a third party make an evaluation of the defendant. By third party, I mean a psychologist that is not associated with either the state or the defense. The third party evaluator in this case is Dr. Jacqueline Zom. You may have heard her mentioned in the testimony earlier. She is here this morning. Both the state and the defense have stipulated to her qualifications as an expert, and she is going to be testifying for you. Each side will have the opportunity to ask her questions. So, Dr. Zom, you can come forward.
All right. So Dr. Zom is, the state is going to ask her questions first. And let me see. They are going to, some things came up about Chloe's past that hasn't come up yet. And so I wanted to play pieces of this. Let me see. All right. And she did not look at the other evaluator's reports when she did her report, and she does not give a diagnosis when she is assessing this. So I believe the state pays for this, so the court. So the state pays for that third party evaluator. Yes, sounds like that. All right. So the state is going to ask the questions first.
That would be consistent with at least average, more than likely above average intelligence.
I wanted to go back because they are going to talk about her intelligence, because somebody asked a question, and I don't know if it's because, I don't know if people were thinking that she was presenting lower functioning, or like if somebody had questions about her intelligence, because I was asked if I thought if she had ever received special education or anything like that. And nope, it sounds like she's of above average intelligence. So we're going to start from here.
Conversation that appeared to have been taped by Mr. Benyamin Mikhail, where he had recorded various statements she had made in the time leading up to the alleged events.
And after you review, any idea how much time you spent reviewing all of that collateral documentation?
I would say between 10 and 16 hours.
Okay. And after did you review all that before you went to meet with Ms. Driver?
I did not review all of it before I went to meet with her. I believe that I had received it and had reviewed some, but I had not reviewed all of it before I met with her. Much of it was also reviewed multiple times.
Okay. And you, on page 19 of your report, you discussed sort of your behavioral observations and mental status of Ms. Driver when you actually went to go see her at the Cherokee County Adult Detention Center?
Yes.
All right. And is it fair to say that you notated in your report that you found Ms. Driver to be of above average intelligence?
I believe her to be of above average intelligence, yes.
And why did you reach that conclusion?
Well, she, reported to have done well in school and excelled academically before she dropped out, but also her communication is very sophisticated. Her language, her use of words, her vocabulary and use of vocabulary in conversation is, I believe, to be above average, as well as she's very articulate and detailed in describing things in a manner that would be consistent with at least average, more than likely above average intelligence.
Okay. You also indicated in your report that she was very much aware of the legal details surrounding her case. What did you mean by that?
She was very much aware that I would be conducting a third evaluation. She was very much aware that she had been evaluated previously on 2 different occasions. She was very much aware that my report would not be confidential, that it would be provided to the court, to the attorneys. She was very much aware of how to reach her attorney should she need to do so. She was also aware in a manner that was quite unique for someone in her situation, in that she spontaneously articulated that 3 years had passed since the offense occurred, alleged offense, and she recalled in much greater detail in terms of her own symptoms and what was going through her mind at the time in far greater detail in the previous evaluations that occurred sooner after the alleged event. So she herself had some concerns regarding, I guess the appropriate word would be the validity of this evaluation, given that so much time had passed.
Okay. And did you notate in your report sort of your lack of concerns with regard to her memory and her ability to recount certain things?
I perceived her to be able to recall things in great detail. I perceived her memory to be, she was able to articulate very things well and seemed to have a very vivid memory for the circumstances leading up to the alleged offense.
All right. And I want to talk to you a little bit about your report as it relates to sort of getting background information about Ms. Driver before you kind of got into the substance of the offense and her mental state surrounding the offense. What did she describe to you about her childhood?
She described basically that she had grown up. She didn't use the word loving. It seemed as though her home may have not been particularly, there may not have been a lot of overtly expressed affection, but she seemed to perceive that she was well cared for, did not describe abuse by her parents, and perceived that her needs and most of her wants were provided.
Okay. She described herself as being boy crazy.
Yes.
Okay. She told you about moving in with boyfriends when she was 15 years old and then with a second boyfriend in 2017.
Yes, she described herself as being a difficult child to parent.
Okay. And she reported to you a lot of history of drug use with cocaine, ecstasy, MDMA.
She did report an extensive drug use starting at a very early age.
Okay. And she indicated that she had gotten some of those drugs from her boyfriends, but also gotten some of those drugs from her brothers.
I believe primarily her boyfriend, her brothers maybe on a couple of occasions was my perception.
Okay. And she reported to you also that she was sexually abused by both of her brothers.
She didn't use those terms explicitly. It seemed that something had occurred. It didn't seem that she perceived it to be a malicious intent.
Okay. She told you that her brothers didn't know what they were doing when
Yes.
they hurt her? Okay. Specifically with regard to her relationship history with the 2 boyfriends she lived with prior to meeting Benyamin, isn't it true that she told you that she was becoming increasingly spiritual while she was dating them and feeling guilty about the life decision she was making?
She did.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about, obviously she told you she met Benyamin and she started a relationship with him when she was 17. Is that right?
Correct.
What did she tell you about sort of the relationship dynamics or the cult dynamics involving Jessica and Sarah and their feelings toward one another?
I believe her language, and I'd have to look back at my writing to be 100% accurate, but I believe the language that she used was that they came on soon after her, and initially she was okay with it. It seemed that contention primarily surfaced after the birth of her daughter when she wanted to live as a family.
Okay. And just with regard to language, is it fair to say that on page 26 of your report, she told you that by the time the baby was 7 or 8 months old, she hated the other wives because they wanted to have a child with Z, and they hated her because she had a child with him first?
Correct.
And isn't it true that she expressed to you multiple times, that you documented in your report, her desire for stability and her desire to be able to give Hannah a normal life?
Correct.
And one of the things that you documented in your report is that he had kept promising her that he would give her a house and a community to raise her baby in.
Yes.
And did that seem to be of significant importance to her
It
surrounding
did.
the dynamics of that relationship?
It did.
Isn't it true that in your evaluation of her, she had an extensive amount of knowledge surrounding sort of the, I don't know what to call it other than fraudulent conduct of the cult?
Can you repeat that?
She had an extensive knowledge of the conduct of this organization, how they got money, how they got cars, how they planned to get houses.
She did. She did. And it was very complex, such that it was confusing to me.
Okay. Did she try to explain it to you?
She did.
Okay. And in fact, she told you that they had all applied for COVID loans under each of their trusts, but she was the only one that got approved.
She did say loans. It may have been COVID. I would have to look back at my exact language, but I do recall the mention of loans that seemed to be very large sums of money that they had all applied for, and she was the only one who was approved. Yes.
Okay. And she indicated that they
So I didn't realize that she was the only one that was approved for the PPP loan. So I didn't realize that she was the only one that was approved for it.
had RVs and vehicles that they had no license and they had no insurance, but they would always get out of it when they got pulled over because they had the trust documentation.
Correct.
And she also told you that their plan of going from North Carolina down to Florida was because they planned to steal 2 houses with their trust that they located on Zillow.
Correct.
And she also indicated to you that they had
What? I missed that the first time I watched this. They plan to steal 2 houses with the trust? What? What?
previously gotten free vehicles utilizing this trust.
Correct.
And did she seem to have an extensive knowledge of sort of the inner workings of that?
She did.
I want to talk to you next about maybe some of the things that she represented to you that were not supported by the collateral documentation. I noted that one of the things in your report was that she told you when she was admitted into the hospital that she weighed 80 pounds. Is that fair?
I can't recall if she said when she was admitted to the hospital or during the culmination of her struggles that led up to the alleged events, but she did note losing significant weight and weighing approximately 80 pounds.
If your report said that she said when she was admitted to the hospital she was 80 pounds, would you have any reason to
I would not disagree with that.
Okay. And you actually notated in your report that you had the medical records, and her medical records indicated that she had normal BMI, right?
Correct.
And in the medical records, it also indicates that she wasn't 80 pounds. She was 113 pounds upon admission.
That's a big difference.
Yes, it had the kilograms, and I did have to do the conversion online. But yes, that is what I noted from her medical records.
Okay. So she had underreported to you that she was 33 pounds skinnier than what she actually was.
It's certain. It seems so based on the documentation that I had in the medical records as compared to her self-report.
Okay. That she was exaggerating how thin and frail she was.
That she was exaggerating or either had misperceived or either was representing a different point in time.
Um, I want to talk to you about your review of her searches. I think you documented several of them in your 38-page.
All right. And so they're going to get to the search history. And it sounds like this expert does feel that she meets the legal requirement. I wanted to get to the point of why she doesn't give a diagnosis. Let me see if I can find that part. Let's see. Okay, so then the defense. Okay. All right. So I'm going to play from here. We'll see.
As she didn't state anything to me that indicated otherwise.
Okay.
It's not inconsistent with what she described to me.
And if she told Dr. Garrett, she recalled apologizing to Hannah and telling her how much she
Yeah.
loved her before she stabbed her.
Yeah. And so I think this expert pretty much is on the same page with everybody else. Okay, diagnosis. Let's get to this part.
Necessarily describe their mental state at the time. It helps us understand a set of symptoms and helps explain behavior. The other school of thought says that the diagnosis can be confusing because the diagnosis doesn't necessarily align all the time with mental state at the time of the offense. And people can make certain assumptions based on diagnosis alone and may make inadequate judgments. So in other words, it can be reckless to do so because a diagnosis can communicate to a layperson information that is not what we're intending.
Okay. And what school of thought were you in not diagnosing her in this criminal responsibility report?
So I did not render a diagnosis. My reason was it's not critical to answer the referral question. The referral question pertains to her mental state at the time of the offense, and a diagnosis would not necessarily explain her mental state at the time of the offense. The diagnoses that I considered, one, people can have very negative assumptions when they see this.
I wonder if she's talking about borderline personality disorder. I wonder if that's the one that she's thinking people can have negative assumptions with, or if she's thinking about bipolar disorder with psychotic features, because that's what she said. Because with schizoaffective disorder, I've mentioned it on my stream at least once or twice, that schizoaffective disorder is very difficult to diagnose just from one session, even 2 sessions with a person. It's normally diagnosed over a period of time in a state hospital because you need to see, does the person ever have psychosis with no mood symptoms. And so normally it's diagnosed on an inpatient setting, but in an inpatient setting. But
this diagnosis. And then another diagnosis, people automatically make assumptions about psychotic symptoms. So without having the opportunity to explain her mental state, I did not want for the diagnosis that I rendered to communicate information about what I perceived to be her mental state at the time of the alleged offense. I prefer to articulate that verbally rather than to put a diagnosis on a report and possibly not have the opportunity to explain it.
Okay. And is your thought process on that, because whether or not she has a diagnosable mental illness is a question of medicine, and whether or not somebody is criminally insane is a question of law.
Correct.
And somebody can have a mental illness and not be criminally insane.
Correct.
And is that what you mean by sort of creating confusion?
In part, and someone can assume that a diagnosis means that mental health symptoms would not account for behavior at the time. So both situations, what you just said, and conversely, that someone could assume that other behaviors account for, that other explanations account for behaviors at the time of the alleged offense other than mental illness.
Okay. And I'm almost done, doctor, but I just want to sort of wrap up. You told us already that none of her delusions related to Hannah being a threat, harm, danger, or peril to her or anyone else, correct?
Correct.
And that all of her delusions related to Hannah and her need to kill Hannah was to save Hannah. Is that correct?
The delusions that involved Hannah seem to relate to her need to kill Hannah to save her, yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
okay, there's a great question, and so I want to answer it. So the question is, can schizoaffective disorder present on a spectrum? So what schizoaffective disorder is somebody meeting criteria for schizophrenia and also meeting criteria for bipolar disorder or for major depression, and that they have psychosis outside of the mood symptoms. So I work with a lot of people with major depression, and when they get severely depressed, they can experience psychosis. And often antipsychotics or mood stabilizers or antidepressants, like they work out the medication part with their doctor. Individuals with bipolar disorder can have psychotic features. So if I were to assess her, I would probably start with borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder with psychotic features. That's probably, but I didn't see all the records. I didn't see all that these doctors have seen, because it sounds like they were thinking the delusions were part of a schizophrenia and not a part of a mood disorder. And like I mentioned, that's very difficult to parse out, especially in a setting like this. All right. There was another question that I wanted to get to. Yeah, so I liked this doctor. I think she did a good job, and the jury understands that she is a neutral person that is not called by the defense, not called by the prosecution. She is there as a neutral person, and I'm glad that the state of Georgia offers that. So if the state has their expert and the defense has their expert, there has to be a neutral expert that comes in. And so, um, all right, let me see. Can someone have multiple personality disorders at the same time? So yes, a person normally they would have traits of multiple personality disorders. So one famous one was that Dr. Curry diagnosed Amber Heard with borderline and histrionic personality features, not those full disorders, just features of those disorders. I mentioned that I was getting vibes of antisocial and borderline personality disorder with Ali Abulaban. That's just my own personal vibe. Like I don't think his diagnosis came up. I know he mentioned ADHD and I think bipolar disorder, but I was getting vibes of those two conditions just as a general person watching that. I, of course, can't diagnose people that I have not met. So these are just my general thoughts based on what I've seen. And so, yes. All right. Let's keep it going. So now the defense is going to cross examine this witness.
Well, sir, thank you.
Just to follow up on that last set of questions, to be clear, Ms. Driver's delusions were not simply related to killing her daughter, correct? They were killing herself and her daughter, right?
Correct. And there were many delusional thought processes as well, but those that pertain to the alleged offense pertain to killing both herself and Hannah. Correct.
And the action she took on December 8th was consistent with that delusion, meaning she stabbed her daughter and also attempted to kill herself, right?
Correct.
Okay. So let's kind of walk through your background. I may have missed this a little bit. You indicated that a lot of your forensic work after obtaining your doctorate was in Mississippi. Is that right?
Not after, before.
Before, okay.
During
How
training.
long were you there in Mississippi?
A year.
I'm
A
going to
year?
fast forward past
And
that part.
when did you?
2012.
So I'm going to fast forward past some of her just history because he's just getting an understanding of when she and the types of assessments and things that she did at different places. So, okay, there we go.
But significant signs to be deemed insane under law. Is that right?
Yes, statistically, the number who are deemed, well, first, it's not a defense that is often.
So the question was, this is only her second time testifying because for most of the criminally insane evaluations that she does or mental state at the time of the offense, for most of them, she finds that they are not criminally, and so she wouldn't be called. And to give an opinion because the defense likely wouldn't take that perspective or opinion, that this is her second time testifying in a situation where she does believe the person meets the criteria for of being legally insane is the word that they use at the time of the offense.
Presented. And secondly, the number who are deemed to fit the criteria is very small, even as a percentage of the number who present with that defense. So yes, that is correct.
Okay. And you have conducted criminal responsibility exams on behalf of defendants in cases. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And that process is typically where, based on the given facts of the case or circumstances that a lawyer has seen based on reviewing the evidence, they believe there might be an issue with a client.
Okay. So I don't know that anything major came up on cross-examination because she is just going to say that she most likely would have went with a diagnosis similar to what I said, that she would have come to a diagnosis of that she didn't disagree with the diagnoses, but maybe she would have went with a different one. But now the state is going to start their rebuttal. Some of this is difficult to understand, and I think the captions are wrong. Okay. So some of this might be a little difficult. We are going to listen to phone calls between Chloe and her mom. Trigger warning for like manipulation, coercive control, like trigger warnings, all the trigger warnings. Okay. And this is from Chloe's side, not her mom. Okay. So this expert is back to so they can enter these calls. So I'm just going to fast forward. And these calls are from February of 2021. This incident happened in December of 2020. December of 2020. This is February of
Driver, Lieutenant
2021.
Mother Renee Driver. These calls were made in February of 2021. The first call was February the 21st of 2021, and the second call was February the 23rd of 2021. Okay.
Your Honor, I'm publishing States Exhibit 134, which is the February 21st, 2021 call.
Thank you. Please remain on the line. Hold for acceptance.
I'm going to fast forward past this part because the first part is just like, do you?
Reject this call. Your call has been accepted. Chloe?
Yeah.
Hey, I saw the 386 number. I don't know what happened to that.
Yeah, it's just this weird thing, like, it's gonna, what you call it, your number. Like, if I call anybody, it's gonna mirror your number. I don't know why it does that, but it's,
Okay, because I called twice, and I'm like, who do I know in Florida that's in jail? I'm like, my two other numbers are right here in the phone.
right.
So I don't look at Tyler and I'm like, well, I don't need to answer those calls, because I don't need to know, but now I know it's you, I'll answer.
Right. Yeah.
Well, how do I sit here in regular?
Yeah, I'm in medical, been doing me, I have a roommate, it's been really good.
Okay, just be careful with what you say.
Yeah.
And are you more comfortable over there, or do you have like, do you people like?
But they're gonna move it to a quieter part, I think, they're moving to a quieter part, medical.
I still don't understand what medical is. I don't understand why you're not in whatever. I don't know.
I don't know either, it's just whatever, I don't know. I know if I have, like, look into it for me, but, right now I'm okay where I'm at, like they really are really serving me at the moment, so.
Okay. Okay, let's math and books.
Yeah, I mean, I would like, if you could add like 500.
So she's asking her mother to add $500 to her books.
And just keep, yeah, like 500, because I put all the money on the phone, like other stuff. I put it onto the phone, it's expensive calls. I know. Yeah, you could.
Wow, so you could possibly set up for, that's a lot of money to be spending on writing.
It's like, $3 for 15, like $3 to $4 for 15 minutes.
So you've been calling quite a bit.
No, I just because the last, yeah, not really.
So she wants her mom to put $500 on the books so that she can make phone. So now we know how she was able to make those 600 phone calls. She was having her mom put money on the phone, and mom is going to get upset because mom believes she's using that money to call Brian. And she is. She is using that money to call Brian. She's going to admit and deny it, but that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. I think I have $100 left from the 200 that you put on. But now I'm asking for 500 to be put on. Because,
So you can call Brian. Yeah. So you can call Brian.
I did call him. We talked, and is Dad able to meet with him?
So she just said, is Dad able to meet with him? So Brian, he wants the money. That's what they're about to get into. They're about to get into the $60,000 that was transferred to the parents. That was supposed to be for Hannah and Chloe to be able to escape and to have some funds to start over. Z wants that money back. And that was a loan in hand. Like Hannah's the one that did Chloe's the one that did the paperwork for that loan.
Like May ago or so ago?
Nope.
Tomorrow?
For what?
For the money?
Chloe, no. No, I'm not gonna do it. That is yours and you're gonna get it for the rest, for however long you're in jail.
What?
That money is for you to eat and to survive on.
And he's going, he's gonna give me the money too, like, he said he will, like,
No, you won't. No, you won't. You're gonna be locked out of his life the next year, I promise you.
fine with you.
I won't. The money is not even, it's not even available right now. His dad he's invested.
So the mother said that the father has invested some of the money. And she's not going to clarify like where or, but that's what they're talking about.
Invested in, I never said that, and I said that to you whenever you said that was like when he was gonna like make you can invest a total under or something. But
He doesn't have money, he doesn't have it to get it right away.
can you explain that?
I just did, you invested it.
And why?
I don't know, you have to talk to dad about it, you have to check on his phone number.
Well, I tried to call him, he didn't answer.
Oh, you have to
You're telling me there's no way to get, I think you're lying. Are you sure about that? Like, there's really no way to get it right.
I'm believing for you, I'm not lying to you. I have no reason to lie to you.
Huh?
I have no reason to lie to you. We were trying to make a decision.
So Chloe said that her mom was lying about the money. And the mom says, I have no reason to lie to you.
We were trying to make a decision for you and Hannah. And someone was invested, and when all this happened, he went ahead and invested all of it. I mean, he can get it, but it's not gonna be.
Can he speak with Brian? Can they set up communication with each other? Can you please have Dad talk to him? Because Brian said that Dad promised to call him. And he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, that doesn't want anybody.
Okay,
Brian Leonard decides to throw these little words in. How we promised this, or how we promised that, or I refuse an animal, or whatever. He doesn't tell us the truth,
well, he said he didn't have the uniform when you asked for it, and Dad asked for it, but he has the uniform now.
Sorry, but it's not worth $65,000. Or whatever it was. And you're silly. I'm telling you, Chloe, you're gonna lose your family if you go this route. And if you're okay.
The mom said, you're going to lose your family if you go this route. So Chloe is asking for her mom to give the money back to Z. Like that's what Chloe wants the mom to do. And the mom would prefer to give the money back to the government but like mom does not want to give the money to Z. She doesn't. And I don't blame the mom. I don't blame the mom for setting that boundary of if you give him back this money, he's going to want nothing to do with you. Like right now, he's trying to get the $60K you have. Like, no, like the mom is trying to set a boundary, but.
Or whatever it was. And you're silly. I'm telling you, Chloe, you're gonna lose your family if you go this route. And if you're okay with that, then so be it.
No, I feel like when things settle down, everything will be okay again, but I mean, when it's all heated right now.
Well, you are not thinking clearly, because giving him that money, you'll never see anything again. You'll never see any of it again.
Say such cool things about him, and just not, please don't do that.
Chloe, he's moving on after this is over. I want you to realize that. He's moving on to his next victim. The next young children he can brainwash.
Children, really long.
So let's replay that part because the mom says he's going to move on to the next child or children that he can manipulate. And Chloe goes, children, wow, mom. But
Were you 16 when you go.
Okay,
What do you work? You were kidding, the clothes.
huh?
Anyway.
Well, you can't stay mad at them, you can't. I know you
I
are.
can't say that, I'm going to destroy my family's life.
I did it.
I can't.
I decided.
No, we both did that.
Really, because all he ever did was try to fix our family, like, remember, like, he would make me.
Stop.
What do you mean?
Stop.
Okay, this is true. I just.
Your father and I have never needed fixing. So I don't even know.
So Chloe was trying to say that Z has fixed, or Brian has fixed her family. And the mom is laughing. She's like, "What? Like, no, he hasn't. Like, we don't need fixing. No." And there is psychosis delusional, and then there is you're in this cult, this fringe group, like there's that and to me, this is coming off, in my opinion, it's coming off manipulative. That's how it's coming off to me. And I think the state is playing this, and the defense might still say that those calls are that Brian is the one telling her to get the money back from her parents. Like, so the state may try to put it all on him. I'm big on people accepting responsibility for their choices. And I think Chloe made some choices. Somebody asked me my opinion earlier, and so I will go on ahead and give it now. Did I save the question? I don't think I saved it. But the question was something to the effect of, what did I think about this case? And if I was on the jury, I would probably say guilty, but mentally ill. I don't know if I would do a full not guilty by reason of insanity after hearing this. Like, this is problematic to me. And this is only call number one. There's another call that we have to listen to too. And I think that was I think mom is supporting her the best way, but like we talked about mom earlier. I think their relationship was interesting. I'll leave it there.
What do you mean by that?
Emotionally, you were very, what do you mean?
No, I mean, emotionally, you had your problems, and you never shared them with us. So, it's fine.
I could,
Well,
but then he taught me how to.
you found a 40-year-old man at the age of 16 to share your issues with. Good for you. And look where you're at.
Well, can you move the money?
I'll talk to Dad.
She said, "Can you move the money?" And mom says, I'll talk to Dad."
Yeah.
You need to go to Angela about all this instead of something on a recorded phone call.
And the mom is again reminding her that she's doing all of this on a recorded phone call. I think this is the second or third time that mom has mentioned that the phone call is being recorded.
It's okay. It's okay to be moved. Okay, all right.
This thing's looking your way, fine.
It would, Mom, it would be okay if you just told Dad to speak with him. Then it wouldn't be anybody.
I'm not telling your father anything. Your dad blocked him for
So now mom is saying, "I'm not going to tell your dad anything. Your dad blocked him for a reason." So like,
Mom, you can't just steal my money.
so she just said, "Mom, you can't just steal Brian's money."
Mom, that's what you're doing.
Is that what you think I'm doing?
No, I think that's what you're doing if you don't listen.
I think that's what you're doing if you don't listen. That's what Chloe said.
Please don't do this. Don't make a war between us. Like, I'm asking you to do something with my money. Can you please just
So Chloe says, "Please don't do this. Like, to not create a war. This is my money. I'm just asking you to do something with my money."
The person that made a war between us is you.
I think mom said something to the effect of the person that's made a war between us is you.
I don't touch your money, and nor do I want to touch that money.
Okay, Mom, then can you please have that unblocked?
Again, I will talk to him, and I will talk to Angela. Or you can talk to Angela.
Well, all we need to do is just tell
I'm
her.
ignoring you, Chloe. I don't want a penny from you. You took everything away from me that ever mattered from you.
I'm glad that
So
we're,
don't ever accuse me of stealing any money.
no.
See, you don't understand what we're going through. You really don't.
Julia, I know you're not trying to steal me money, but you're trying to rule over me like I'm a 5-year-old, and it's not okay.
So Chloe's saying you're trying to roll over me like I'm a 5-year-old, and the mom is trying to say like you don't know what we're going through. And really that money could have been used for her defense, or I don't know.
Get the money to them.
Chloe, somebody should have taken over somebody should have treated you like a 5-year-old 5 years ago, so you would have never been in this mess today.
Yeah, you should.
This call is about things are about to get heated, or so things were already heated, but things are really so, because Chloe said to her mom that she's being treated like a 5-year-old, and the mom is like, well, we should have treated you like a 5-year-old and we wouldn't have been in this situation. And like
But I wouldn't have been in the situation that you never cared to.
and so I mentioned this. I wondered if Chloe viewed the family just letting her leave. So at 15 years old, she was allowed to live at her boyfriend's house. I was wondering if she felt that she wasn't cared for. And witness, if you didn't see the stream from this morning, I covered Chloe's mom's testimony. And in that testimony, Chloe's mom talks about feeling exhausted and being overwhelmed, and that the oldest brother, would badger her and she would just give in. And so Chloe kind of did the same thing. There really weren't clear boundaries in this family, in my opinion. And things were pretty permissive. And in a permissive situation, the kids, they don't learn that, like, hey, like what the boundaries are. And so I share that for education. I really do. But like this is and and the defense is trying to say that in this moment that she's psychotic, that she's schizoaffective, and she's having a very goal directed, um like, this is probably before her medications were monitored, and where her medications were managed. I do not know if that's how it was, but that would be my thought. What was the question? Oh, and emancipation is difficult. So I worked with somebody at 17 years old. They had their own car, they had their own job, they had all of this in place, and the courts would not emancipate them. Emancipation is difficult because it makes the parents are no longer legally responsible for their child. I think I did court ordered therapy for that one, but emancipation is difficult. And you have to have like a driver's license, and normally like a means of income. You have to be able to manage yourself, and every state's different. So because somebody mentioned being in Canada and getting emancipated at 15. In my state, Virginia, it is difficult. Different states. So in Tennessee, it might have been easier. I'm not sure. I know in Virginia, particularly in my area, it can be tough.
Are you kidding me? This is my fault?
I know you.
That
Ms.
was
Jarrett, you indicated that was on February 21st of 2021.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the next call was on what date?
February the 23rd of 2021.
Publishing
days
States
later.
Exhibit 135.
I'm going to fast forward through the
Thank you.
intro.
This is a an inmate at the three-way or call waiting is not allowed and may automatically disconnect this call. This call is subject to monitoring and recording. If you are an attorney or designated legal counsel, contact inmatesales.com at 702-931-3938 to have your number set to do not record. Please select from the following options if you consent to this call being recorded, and to accept this call, dial 1 now. To reject this call, your call has been accepted. Hello?
Hey,
Hello?
hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. What's up?
Hear me now?
Yes.
I saw Angie today. I didn't get my number. She came and saw me, so I'm on my free time, and, yeah, I don't know, did she tell you that I was gonna call?
She said you were gonna try to call, but, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not gonna hear from you not.
Well, just for future reference, you can hit number, you can push 1 to accept the.
I know that now. I know that.
Okay. Yeah, so me first answer. Well, I talked to her, and I guess you'll be happy to know that they blocked him. I can't call him, so.
So Chloe is informing her mom that they blocked Brian, Z, Benyamin. They blocked his phone number.
And I'm not gonna be talking to him, they blocked the number.
Only because you're being forced not to talk to him, right?
And mom is like, because you're being forced not to talk to him.
I mean, basically, yeah. What do you want me to stop?
But you still don't understand, do you?
Well, I'm not gonna pursue it,
I mean, the things he said to me the other day when we talked was just, it was just hateful. And I,
So the mom said the things that he said to me the other day was just hateful. So I'm guessing the mom did talk to Brian.
can't,
when I was saying.
what?
You stole, when I'm saying like stealing money, like, when you had said the investment thing, that's what, because I didn't say, like, I didn't know anything about that, but now I understand what you were saying, and I actually appreciate it.
So when the dad invested the money, it was to increase so that he probably put it in like a higher interest savings account or something. I don't know. Like it wasn't like he went and bought a barber shop or something. Like it sounds like he was trying to put it, instead of it being in like a low interest savings account, like it sounds like he invests, because sometimes you can get like a CD, or you can do different things to have a higher interest rate, especially for that amount of money. And so Chloe is apologizing, it sounds like, for claiming that they were trying to steal her money.
They're different accounts. It's not something that, well, it doesn't matter because it's not happening. I refuse.
Refuse what?
I'm either gonna give it to charity or the government.
So the mom says, she's going to give it to charity, or she's going to give it to the government before I give it to him.
Before I give it to him.
Okay, I mean, I'm not, like I said, I can't pursue it anymore, you know, I'm not gonna, if I was free to do that, I was gonna pursue it, but I mean, like, they're kind of making it to where.
I do not want to talk about that. I do not want to talk about the money anymore. I am sensitive to this money. It's been nothing but a curse. I wish it was never in my account to manage. If I would have known this was going to happen, I would have never accepted the money. It's nothing but a headache. I don't want a penny of it. I never have, never will. And as far as the other thing that you said was pretty hateful, I mean, and you know, it's not my fault that you're going through this. And I was not attacking neither to any of you.
I don't know where you're getting all this from, but we should like just stop talking.
Because you told me I should have been more strict. When I said I should have been more strict, you said yes. Then maybe this wouldn't have happened.
So mom is, I think, still upset about the last conversation from 2 days ago because mom is bringing this back up again. That I guess Chloe had said that mom should have been stricter with her, which I don't know that this is the best time to be having this conversation, but it is what it is.
So Chloe, I don't think you remember how you were as a teenager. You never listened to, you never listened to me. Just like now, you still don't listen to me. I can tell you what's best for you, and you'll just argue with me because it's not what you want. And the fact of the matter is I've got 30 years on you. Okay, you're 20 years old and you're inexperienced and you just are going with the first thing that you go, the first person that you met with or met. That happened to be twice your age or more. Which means you've got plenty of life experience, way more than you will, or that you have. So I also have way more life experience than you. And I really wish just once in a while you would actually take my advice. But if you choose you don't want to take my advice, that's fine. Then there's really no reason for you to call.
Let me know in the chat if that part was clear. I feel like this part was clearer to understand. So let me know in the chat if y'all need me to restate what mom said or if that part sounded clear on my end. Did that part sound clear to you all? Let me know. I was able to understand all of that. We'll keep it going. Okay, restate. All right. So the mom pretty much was saying that I'm going to go back. That mom has 30 years of life experience and that she wishes Chloe would listen to her. Like that's the gist of what mom said.
Way more than you will, or that you have. So I also have way more life experience than you. And I really wish just once in a while you would actually take my advice.
And she's saying, I really wish you would take my advice.
But if you choose you don't want to take my advice, that's fine. Then there's really no reason for you to call.
Yeah, if you don't want to take my advice, there's really no reason for you to call.
Okay, then can you move all the money back into my, okay, so if I'm talking to you, then how much am I supposed to get what I need from commissary? How much?
So Chloe then says, how am I supposed to get what I need for commissary?
I will talk to you.
Dad and I are going to start putting money on your account. It's going to be a lot less than what you're used to. You've got money on there right now. You've got probably, I think, about $200 on there. That will last you quite a while.
So she has $200 on her commissary right now. And the parents are trying to set a boundary to not put as much money on her books, on her commissary as they normally do.
I moved half of it to my phone,
So Chloe already moved half of that $200 that the parents had put on. She put half of that on the phone.
I only have 127 on it, and I moved, there's 50 of it, actually about 40 now on the phone, and I can't move it back, so.
And Chloe's saying that she's already moved some money to the phone and she can't move it back.
Okay, well, your father just put another 100 on it yesterday.
Okay.
So whatever's on your commissary, you can check it. You just need to spend it wisely.
And her mom's asking her to spend her money wisely.
Okay?
And start doing it, like you're just gonna start doing it weekly.
And so Chloe's asking if they're going to put money on her account weekly.
No, we're going to watch and see when you're going down, or you can give me a call, or you can give your father a call.
But you're making it sound like you don't want me to do that.
But then, so that's where to me, her mom doesn't set clear boundaries. Like a clear boundary would be, we're going to put $50 a week. Like we have been putting, you know, $100 a week. We're only going to put 50. Like to me, the mother, in my, but like, and this isn't a critique. Like this is, we're here to learn. To me, her mom isn't setting a clear boundary. And somebody with borderline personality disorder needs clear boundaries, because then it's like, okay, I know exactly what it is. Like to me, this would be confusing, and I don't have a personality disorder. Like it's like, so what are you going to do? And it's not particularly clear, but that is uh Chloe's focus right now, is her phone and commissary. Which,
Well, Chloe, you probably need to manage this money. You can call us once a week if you need anything. You can call once.
and so mom is saying you need to manage your money, call if you need anything, which is not a clear boundary, in my opinion.
At least if you need anything. If you want to talk and be civil, you can call twice a week. I don't care.
If you want to talk and be civil, you can call us twice a week.
But the point is you haven't been, since you've been starting to talk to him, you changed right back to the old Chloe that.
So, and then mom is saying the minute you talk to him, you change back to the old Chloe.
Before any of this even happened.
Before any of this ever happened. And Chloe's going to mention that she was on drugs at that time. Like that's what she's going to say.
Knows everything, nobody else knows anything type of person. And I don't want to deal with that Chloe. I want to deal with the Chloe that
Well, I would like to just,
you were before you started talking to him again.
well, to me, that started talk for at me before was doing a lot of drugs.
And so Chloe says, because her mom is saying, I want to get back to the Chloe you were before you met him. And Chloe says, well, I was on a lot of drugs at that time.
So, I mean, he
What kind of drugs?
I was like, what do you mean? Like, every,
I'm talking about a month ago when you weren't talking to him, you were civil. What are you talking about drugs? What do you mean?
I thought you meant from way back.
No, Chloe, no. Oh my God. You're such a confused little girl.
Okay, I just want to wrap up.
Are you still taking your medicine?
Yes,
That they're giving you? Well, maybe you need something stronger.
that's really,
Okay, so I'm gonna say what I heard. So if this is too much, okay, because I think we have maybe a minute more for this conversation. I'm not sure. Like what the mom said is, are you still taking your medication? And Chloe says yes. And mom says, maybe you need something stronger. And she doesn't sound like moody or like, to me, in this phone conversation, I don't know what is triggering her, but like Chloe sounds calm and rational to me. She doesn't seem like psychotic or aggressive, or like she seems fine. I think I don't think that was appropriate in my personal thoughts and opinions.
really fucked up for you to say that to me.
Don't
And then Chloe kind of made she said that's really awesome when you say that to me.
talk to me that way, and you know it's not.
You're being really rude.
And so Chloe says, "Mom, you're being really rude." I mean, like, kind of is. I don't,
Really? Don't talk to me like that. No, I'm not. I'm speaking the truth.
and so Mom says she's speaking the truth, but the truth, I don't know that that's the truth. I don't. That this is tough.
No, you think you're saying that, it's still for you to say you're not qualified to say that. Are you the doctor? You want me to start with?
What else do you need, Helen? I mean, what else?
You agreed, because of the funeral, you agreed to give 5,000, and I think think that's fair. Because it's.
Well, you know what though? I just found out the state of Georgia will reimburse him. And I was reading that before I talked to Dad. Dad doesn't want to touch that money.
So I think Chloe wanted for her parents to give him $5,000, and they are saying he can get that. I don't know if it was like for a few. I don't know what the $5,000 was for, but the parents think he can get reimbursed from the state of Georgia.
Why?
Other than giving you the money that you need, because it's not our money, yeah, we have to deal with it.
No, I heard what she told me today. She was making it sound like she was scaring you into not touching it.
Sharon, who?
You,
What are you talking about?
tell Angela to not touch that money.
No, she's not even scare me into not touching it.
So Chloe said that she thought her mom was scared to touch it, and mom's going to clarify, no, she isn't. She isn't scared to touch it.
Huh?
No, she didn't scare me into not touching it.
Okay, well, I mean, she told me that she told you that.
Okay.
And it sounds like you're listening to her by saying that you're trying not to touch the money. You're trying not to have anything to do with it.
Well, I already told you, I don't even want to talk about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you can wrap up this conversation, but so you know for a fact, Mom, that he's going to be reimbursed for that, because if he's not, I was like.
That according to, yes, I heard that from Angela. That there's a victim advocate or something to do with funeral. I mean, it's been a while.
Okay, so they must be talking about the funeral, that he can get reimbursed from the victim advocate.
Since she told me, so I can't really remember what she said word for word, but.
Okay, then I'll talk with her, and if I get confirmation that's the case, that could be the last that we talk about the money, because I don't want to talk about.
Okay, that's all I want to hear about. That's what I want to hear.
And then Chloe just said, like, this can be the last time that we talk about the money, if that's true. If they can get reimbursed from the victim advocate for the funeral.
But I'm not gonna go without.
Okay.
You might not go without, okay?
All right, if that confirmation doesn't come, though, I want to have that topic. That's only if she doesn't know for sure he's gonna get that. But, so.
Well, I'm sure there's a process he has to go through. It just doesn't get mailed to him. I mean, he's gonna probably have to show how much it costs or whatever. And I'm sure there's I'm sure there's a limit or whatever, but.
So they aren't just going to give Benjamin, Brian, they're not just going to give him, $5,000. He will have to prove that he paid somebody a certain amount. Like he would just have to submit a receipt that this is what it cost.
I don't know. I have no idea. I've never put you all that. I don't know.
Well, that's the only thing I'm gonna be talking about, if
It's so bad. I just don't want to talk about it because I don't care about it.
Okay, well, it's just one little thing, like, it's just that one thing. If, then,
Chloe, I really feel like you're being very disrespectful with your tone and your words and you sort.
So the mom is calling her disrespectful in her tone and this call doesn't sound disrespectful to me. Y'all let me know in the chat. This call doesn't sound disrespectful to me. It doesn't to me. Early childhood experiences and detachment, in my experience, can have a lot to do with the development of a personality disorder. Chloe likely felt like a burden. She's been described as difficult to parent. And I work with teens with these types of behaviors, and I work with the parents on setting healthy boundaries, on not being reactive or taking the behaviors personally. I'm talking about like minor, I'm talking about like crimes, like that's a whole, but to not take, and to not overreact when something happens. and to not underreact when things happen, to work on validating. Um, I have a lot of tools that I give the people that I work with. That might be a good video for the future. I will add that to the content list. So, like, raising a child with personality traits or that's exhibiting some of these types of behaviors. I do not diagnose personality disorders in children or teens because a lot of that can be based on environment. So if Chloe had graduated from high school and went off to college, I don't know how her personality would have developed in a safe, healthy environment. I don't think with her upbringing and then a cult, like that was a bad combination. I think the cult, you know, reestablished her fear of abandonment and rejection and a lot of those underlying symptoms of borderline personality disorder, just based on what I've heard.
I really do. You put this family through a lot, and somehow you're being bitchy to me.
Because of what happened yesterday, like, I think you think, what?
What happened yesterday? I didn't talk to you yesterday. You called me 3 times and I didn't answer.
Okay, sorry, the day before, time's a little funky here.
Mm-hmm. When you were very rude.
When you were telling me what you were going to do with my money, I felt like that was rude and hateful.
Enough, Chloe.
It's like,
You're going to be taken care of, whether it comes out of your money or whether it comes out of that loan or whether it comes out of my money. Okay? You'll be taken care of.
So the mom is reassuring her that she will be taken care of.
But stop making it sound like it's your money to where you're controlling me. This is not happening that way.
I just want to know where my money's at and what's happening with my money.
Chloe just wants to know where her money's at and what's happening with her money.
Your money is in different accounts.
Okay.
That's all I know.
Her money is in different accounts.
Dad put it away. I don't talk to him about it. He doesn't talk to me about it. The only time this ever comes up is when you are on the phone. Like I said, we're going to lower your budget and we'll take care of it. Just got to be very, very careful on how you spend, because I'm not going to be putting $200 and $500 down on your account like you were asking. I'm not doing that.
Okay, well, you thought to do that just a few, like, a week ago, you thought that was a great idea to do.
I told you this call will be terminated in 2 minutes. Chloe, I told you they charge 10%. You're the one that said put more. Dad doesn't want to, and we're not going to.
Oh, so he must have put it in, I don't know where he put it, because I guess it costs 10%, like it would be 10% to pull all the money out, which would be like $6,000. Yeah.
So when I need books,
Then you give me a call. We'll see how much they are, and we'll go from there.
you can find.
The way that I define and the way that I look at an enmeshed family. So within a healthy family, I know where my feelings end and my child's feelings begin. Y'all know I have a 7-year-old, and if he has a hard day at school, it doesn't make the rest of my day horrible. If he has a good day at school, that doesn't make my day amazing. Like his day is his emotions are his. And if he's struggling, I'm there to support him, but I can't take his emotion away. His emotions are not my responsibility. Now, as his parent, I care about him, I support him, all of those things, but I don't, and it's not my job to like not for him to never be sad. So sometimes parents can feel guilty, especially if it's a single parent or a parent that's working a lot or things like that. Like sometimes there can be this guilt and they might let the kid get away with everything, which is not a good, like, because that's permissive and that is not helpful. And kids need healthy boundaries. So my child is not responsible for my emotions. I don't tell my son, like, I'm having a tough day, make sure you don't upset me. Like, no, like if I'm having a tough day, I might say like, "Hey, I had a long day. I'm gonna take an extra 10 minutes to get myself together." Okay. Like that's something I'm gonna do because I had a tough day and I'm holding my emotions, my feelings. I set boundaries. And now I'm sometimes flexible. So I think boundaries can be flexible. Sometimes my child, if he eats dessert after dinner, and he's supposed to clean up his area after he eats dessert, and the rule is supposed to be, if he forgets, then he's supposed to eat dessert at the table. Like, he likes eating dessert in front of the TV while he's watching YouTube Kids or something. um but if he doesn't clean up his area, then sometimes he has to go back. And but I'll be honest, I don't like that's not one that I do all of the time. And so I don't think boundaries have to be like a never ever, like if you mess up one time it's like, I think boundaries can be flexible, and I pick and choose my battles. But I hope that is helpful. All right. I think we're almost done with this one.
You can go on like cheap, and there's something called.
I know,
Like,
I know, we will, but
Aw.
you really need to be, managing your commissary money,
well,
you
it's
know.
something you're not for me.
Fine?
You're the one in control of it. Sounds like you're gonna be doing that for me.
How come I wouldn't order you food?
Well, I skipped it a couple of times.
This call will be terminated in 1 minute. I get that, Chloe, I get that. I'm just saying, just please start watching and paying attention. And you've done good so far, except for phone calls. I think you're spending way too much money on phone calls.
So her mom's trying to tell her, you're spending way too much money on phone calls. She called him 600 times in 2 years. 600, over 600 times in 2 years.
I think that's about to be over.
Well, one, yeah, it's about to be over. Two, it's because they called during the weekend, and weekends are more expensive on patrol. That's all.
Okay, okay. Well, just call them every week, okay?
So, yeah, well, now that I know that, and this is probably gonna hang up, so I'll call back and, call back again, because,
Okay.
so I'm almost done with my Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
like my monkey read. She really likes it too. But when we're allowed to be done with that, I'm thinking about.
This call was terminated because it exceeded.
That's it.
I don't have any further questions.
So this part was hard. So the incident was December 8th, and February 21st and 23rd, she is trying to get Z money. And if I was on the jury, this would have been hard. So I'm going to let the next part play because I was surprised when I heard this next thing.
Any questions for this witness?
All right, you can step down. Thank you.
State?
Any other evidence from the state?
So the state, those are the only two things the state submitted for rebuttal. So, huh, those were the only two things that the state submitted for rebuttal. I would have, and I think there were 4 mental health evaluations, and I'm guessing all 4 agreed that yes, there could have been a mental crisis at the time. I don't know if the judge is going to hear the above average, if the jury is going to hear that she's of above average intelligence and she's very, I don't know what the jury's going to do with this. So we're about to zoom to closing arguments because that's what happened after. The prosecution is going to start with closing arguments, and the prosecution is going to bring it back to um this is about Hannah. If I said, I might have said Chloe instead of, I don't know. But the victim in this case is Hannah, and the prosecution is going to bring it back to that. Trigger, I have not watched this, so I don't know what all is going to be said. The state is going to start with the law. They're going to break down the law first, and then the defense is going to go, and then the state is going to come back. So I think we'll start here.
Closing arguments. The state has the right to open and conclude.
I told you when I stood up before you in opening statements that Hannah would get lost this week. That there would be a lot of shiny objects, there would be a lot of scandalous evidence, there would be a lot about Chloe Driver, the cult they were in, Benyamin, his abusive, controlling practices. And all of a sudden, just like that, we forget why you were all here. This is why. You will have an indictment, and the indictment is not about Chloe Driver being a victim. It is about Hannah being murdered by the one person she should have been able to count on to do anything to protect her. There were issues in this case that are relevant to her mental state, to her state of mind, but they are not the focus of this case. The focus of this case is your decision with regard to the counts of the indictment. And the counts in the indictment are malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, cruelty to children in the first degree. And what I want to do with you, I get to talk to you twice. I get to open and I get to conclude because the state has the burden of proof in this case. So what I would like to do is spend the first portion of me speaking to you about the law that governs your decision. And I stood before you in opening statements and I said, now's not the appropriate time for me to talk to you about the law, but that will come. And I have tried to give you glimpses throughout the course of this trial by asking the right questions for you to understand what issues you need to pay attention to as it relates to the law. And this is the part where hopefully it all comes together and we can talk about applying the law to the facts. So I'm going to spend my first portion with you just talking about the law. And then after the defense delivers their closing argument, then I will talk to you about how we apply the law to the facts in this case. The state has the burden of proving her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And everybody has heard that term, but very few people really understand what it means. But what it is the doubt of a fair-minded, impartial juror honestly seeking the truth. And when the judge reads you the law, you're going to hear embedded in the law at multiple points is that word truth. And what you will see is that a jury trial and your role is about a pursuit of the truth. And the law gives you tools to find it. And what the law says about proof beyond a reasonable doubt is that is based upon common sense and reason. You are allowed to bring your life experience and your common sense and your reason into that jury deliberation room with you to reach conclusions, to make deductions, to discard stuff that doesn't make sense to you. You are allowed to do that. And the law expressly tells you that you can. What is evidence? The judge is going to talk to you about the different kinds of evidence. There's two kinds of evidence, and you don't really need to worry too much about the distinction between the two because the weight you give them can be the same. But direct evidence is something that somebody saw, like an eyewitness, something that points directly to a fact. We hear a lot about circumstantial evidence, and it gets kind of a bad rap because it seems like it's less valuable. But really what circumstantial evidence is a set of facts or things that prove something by inference. And I'll give you an example of some circumstantial evidence in this case that we saw. She had cash in her bag. She had a cell phone right there beside her. Those things lead to the inference that she had other options. You can infer, if you wish to do so, that she could have just called 911, that she could have just called an Uber, that she could have just walked out and ran to the neighbor's house next door. You can look at all of the connected surrounding circumstances and you can reach conclusions and make deductions based upon that evidence. You determine the weight to give to the evidence, whether it is direct or circumstantial. That is solely your responsibility as jurors. Now, the judge is also going to tell you that your role is to assess the credibility of the witnesses. And you can consider a lot of things when you're determining the credibility of each witness. And this applies to the statements of the defendant as well, the driver. You can discard whatever it is you want about the statements she made to the experts, the statements she made in the hospital, and you can accept whatever it is you want. You and you alone are the determiners of the credibility of each statement in this case. And the law gives you tools to decide and assess things that you would normally do in your life just based upon common sense. You know, do these people have a reason to lie? Do they have a motive to lie? Do they have anything to gain from the outcome of this case? Things that you use in your everyday life to assess people's credibility, you can do in this case as well. And the judge is going to instruct you that this is the law, the nature of the facts about which they testify, their means and opportunity of knowing the facts about which they testify. And this is true for expert witnesses as well. And I think that that's an important distinction for you to understand, is that just because somebody comes in here and they're called an expert doesn't mean that you have to automatically accept their testimony or their statement or their conclusions. We saw this week that there were multiple experts and they had varying degrees of thoroughness with regard to what they chose to focus on, with regard to what they assigned weight and significance to. And you can accept or reject any testimony of any expert that came before you this week, just the same as you can with any other witness. The person in this case who has the most to gain is Chloe Driver. And that is clear. We heard evidence from the experts about sort of the cautionary tale that is using the DSM-5 in a forensic setting, because the people in a forensic setting necessarily are facing criminal charges and necessarily have reason to kind of exaggerate their symptoms, because there are defenses under the law that only apply to them if certain things exist. So that's something that you can evaluate in deciding how much credibility and weight to give to the statements that Chloe Driver made after she had had the opportunity to consult with a lawyer and after she understood what her options were for a defense. And I'm going to go through some of her statements in my second closing that she made before she consulted with a lawyer, before she knew the law on insanity. The truest version of her statements about her motivations and why she did what she did was in that hospital when she was writing. It was closest in time to when she committed the act. What you're going to have to determine is what was her mental state at the time she committed the act. So those statements are valuable both in they're the closest in time as you will ever see to her committing the act. And it was prior to her understanding what her options were to get out of the situation she put herself in.
Ooh, so that came up with the first expert, that the first expert explained not guilty by reason of insanity when they were determining if she was competent or not. Because I think she filed the NGRI, the not guilty by reason of insanity. I want to say that was filed in this year. I want to say it might have been June of this year. I could be wrong. I almost think it was June of this year. I could be wrong.
So I ask you to assess that in determining which of her versions of statements to assign the most credibility to. Venue. The judge is going to tell you venue is a jurisdictional fact, and every crime has to be prosecuted in the county in which it occurred. And the reason I think this is important to talk to you about in this particular case is because the only crimes committed in Cherokee County were by Chloe Driver. And what I want you to know is that There has been a lot of collateral information put before you about what happened in Asheville.
Ooh. So I'm gonna make myself big for this one. Uh, I think what she's trying to get at with this is the jury probably does not like Z, Brian Benyamin. They might feel like his actions might have contributed to what Chloe did. I've seen that in my chat a lot. Like I've seen people like, why isn't he being charged? Why isn't he charged with neglect? If there were all of these signs of her mental illness, why wasn't he charged? I've seen a lot of that. And I think that's why she might have mentioned that. Ooh.
What happened in, other places, people that Benyamin has abused elsewhere, crimes committed by third parties. You, me, the judge, nobody in this courtroom has any power or authority to do anything that happened outside of Cherokee County. And so I ask you to focus on what your role is as a juror in this case. And the only crime that happened in Cherokee County was the murder of Hannah Nicole Driver. And I ask you to focus, because that is your role and your duty and the oath that you have taken to determine what the law and evidence is regarding the commission of that crime.
So there is a good question about her mother and everybody else. So everybody has described Chloe as a good, loving mother. And the question is, did she truly love her daughter and have a mental break, or did she never really love her daughter at all? And two things can be true at the same time in a way. So what I mean by that is I think it was deeper than her daughter. I don't think she expected to survive. And that's what makes this difficult for me. I think this was a murder attempt on her. Like, I think she did not mean to survive. And um yeah, that's the hard part. And Chloe said in the hospital that she just wanted it to be her, Hannah, and Z, or Brian or Benyamin. She just wanted it to be the three of them. That's what was said. And like, all right, we're gonna keep it going.
Whether somebody else has committed other terrible crimes in another jurisdiction is not a question that you are going to be asked today. And it is not a question that you have taken an oath to resolve. So you have to focus your attention in on Hannah, the law as it relates to Hannah, and the evidence as it relates to Hannah. The charges in this indictment are laid out: malice murder, felony murder based on the underlying crime of aggravated assault, felony murder based upon the underlying crime of cruelty to children in the first degree, and then the offenses of aggravated assault and cruelty to children in the first degree. You'll have the indictment back with you, so you'll be able to look at the charging document, count 1, count 2, count 3, count 4, count 5. But I want to walk through a little bit about what the state has to prove to establish each of those crimes. The first is malice murder. In order to establish and prove malice murder, the state must show that she caused the death of another human being unlawfully and with malice aforethought. And obviously,
All right, so I want to get to the part where she explains the plea, the not guilty by reason of insanity, because I wonder if she's going to break that part down. So she's going to break down each one of these charges. Please know I have the what's it called? Y'all know the words. I have the link down in the description if you would like to go back and see all of this part. All right. Okay. All right. So I want to get to this part.
So I want to talk about that. Under the law, Chloe Driver is presumed sane. Every person is presumed to be of sound mind and discretion. We start from the proposition that she is sane, that she is criminally responsible for her actions, and that she has to suffer the consequences of her crimes just as any other citizen. That is the position you start from. You may infer that the acts of a person of sound mind and discretion are the product of that person's own will. When the judge will give you this law, she will tell you a person of sound mind and discretion intends the natural and probable consequences of their acts. I will talk to you a little bit more about applying this law to what we know about Chloe Driver and her decisions and the actions that she committed, but it was very, very clear that she understood she was murdering Hannah. And she understood the permanency of that decision. She understood that she was taking away a life. And the thing about the law is the law recognizes the value of human life, even if Chloe Driver didn't. When we talk about the insanity defense, the state only has the burden of proving the things I just talked to you about, proving the elements of murder, proving the elements of felony murder, proving the elements of cruelty to children in the first degree, aggravated assault. We have to prove those elements that are contained in the indictment. The defense has the burden of proving her criminal insanity to the extent that she is not criminally responsible. That is not our burden. So that is a difference in the law that is not typical, because usually the state has the burden of proving everything beyond a reasonable doubt. But in this case, because the law presumes she is sane, they have the burden of proving her insanity. You probably noticed in our presentation of evidence, in the state's case, we really just focused on the murder. And in the defense's case, they focused really on the insanity, because that is their burden to raise. It is our burden to focus on the counts and the charges in the indictment before you. You're going to have 4 options on your verdict form. And I think this is important for you to know. It's going to say guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity, or guilty but mentally ill. And I will talk to you a little bit more about what each of these mean as we kind of get into the weeds of it. But this will not be as simple of a verdict form as guilty or not guilty. There are other options. But what I want you to understand is, once all this evidence comes before you and once I really explain to you what the law is, you will really be left with 2 options: guilty or guilty but mentally ill.
So Georgia has 4 options. They have guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity. And that is what Chloe, that's the defense that was presented, or the guilty but mentally ill. And I've mentioned, based on hearing everything, I personally would go with guilty but mentally ill. And if I was on a jury and if we had to deliberate and maybe somebody could change my mind to the insanity, and that's what a jury does. But if I was going into deliberations, my first vote would be guilty but mentally ill. That would be my first vote. All right. And this is something unique to Georgia, Nevada, and there are certain states that have this particular option.
Based upon the evidence that has come before you, you will not be able to find her not guilty of committing the act. She has admitted that she murdered Hannah.
Yeah.
Not guilty is really not an option based upon her own admissions about the act.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about the law of insanity and what they must prove and all the reasons why it cannot and has not been proven and will not, the evidence will not show that the law of insanity applies to her. And we'll talk about that more in my second.
So mental illness is never a defense for capital M. And what I will say about that, and that's why I do these streams, that's why I talk about this, because there is a lot of stigma that's associated with mental illness. So with Aliyah Boulaban was jealous. He thought he owned his wife. He thought her just talking to, so she wanted to leave him, and he set up this plan, and because this was all the evidence that came into court, and he made a decision. He was also on cocaine. He was also on like the booger sugar. Like he was this, that was one of the most malicious cases, along with some other cases that I've seen. But I don't even think he tried for an insanity defense. He tried to say that it was a what's the word? He tried to say that he acted on, like, I think he was trying to talk it down to maybe second degree, or that he couldn't help himself. Like, that's what he was trying to say. And he was found guilty of first degree. And uh and back, I think it was just because of what she did. So Lorena Bobbitt, she got mad at her husband, and y'all know what Lorena Bobbitt did, okay? And at that time, I think everybody was just like, who would do that to somebody? um a person can have a mental illness and still understand the difference between right and wrong. And so that's why this is so tough. And I think it's why juries struggle so much with this particular diagnoses. The ones that I have seen them be found not guilty by reason of insanity are mothers with severe postpartum psychosis, and they might be in treatment. They might have all of these different things. And I think of the Andrea Yates case. Her first trial, she was found guilty. She was given a new trial, and she was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And she's likely going to live the remainder of her years in a mental health institution. And that's what she does not want, to be discharged from the hospital. She has had the opportunity to have hearings to possibly be released. And it's my understanding that she has made statements that she needs to stay where she is. And so, all right, I hope all of that's helpful. All right, we'll keep it going.
Flows. But what I want you to understand is that you still are going to be making decisions. Even if you choose guilt, you will have to make decisions with regard to guilt or guilty but mentally ill. So when we talk about the insanity defense, I'm eager to get to my second close so we can talk about the evidence and apply this to the evidence, but bear with me here so I can just explain to you the law before we kind of do that equation and put it all together. There are two ways of proving insanity under Georgia law: the inability to distinguish between right from wrong, and delusional compulsion. And I want to talk to you about each of those. The inability to distinguish between right and wrong. What the law says is the test is whether the insanity was such that it deprived the person of the mental capacity to distinguish between right and wrong in relation to the act. And the judge will tell you that the question that you have to ask with regard to did she have the capacity to distinguish between right and wrong is her mind so impaired that she is incapable of forming the intent to commit the act, or to understand that a certain consequence would likely result from the act. And when we really get into the weeds and we look at it, it is going to be very, very clear based on her statements to the doctors, her actions, her statements on scene, her statements to the detective, her statements to her mother and Benyamin right after she committed the act. She always knew the wrongfulness of the act. She always knew the consequence of the act. That was never lost on her. She never, ever demonstrated any inability to distinguish between right and wrong. She just chose the wrong. And she understood the result and the consequence of that decision. Delusional compulsion is a little bit trickier, and so I want to walk you through it step by step. You have to have all of these.
So this is the one that the jury might find that she had a delusional compulsion. And I think that's what the experts kind of said as well. And that's where, so this is new for me. So I'm used to the first part. Delusional compulsion is in Georgia. That isn't an option in every state, but Georgia has this one added. And the jury could say that, yes, I think she acted under a delusional compulsion. The jury could, and I respect the jury no matter what. So like, I'm glad that I am able to have a general opinion about these things. They have seen this from a different perspective. And so I respect the jury no matter what. But this could potentially get her a not guilty by reason of insanity. And I just want to do that reminder that even if she is found not guilty by reason of insanity, that does not mean that she is discharged, like she goes home. So she would go to a state hospital for years, for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, for the rest of her life. I don't know. Like she would go to a state hospital and she would have to stay there until the courts deemed that she was no longer a risk to herself or others. So, yeah.
Things in order to be found not guilty by reason of insanity based on delusional compulsion. And you will see when I go through this, you'll start to kind of put the pieces together about why we questioned all the experts in the manner that we did. Why are they asking everybody if she was afraid of Hannah? Why are they asking everybody if she ever thought Hannah was a threat to them? Because that's the law. And I want to walk you through it piece by piece. In order to show that she is not guilty by reason of insanity based upon her suffering from a delusional compulsion, what they have to prove is that the defendant was actually laboring under a delusion at the time of the commission of the alleged act. That when she stabbed Hannah to death, she was actively laboring under the compulsion of a delusion. That the criminal act itself, her act of killing Hannah, was connected to that particular delusion. You saw me up here ask the expert, I said, tell me the particular delusion. Because what got lost is we just talk about in her life, she's had delusions. That's not.
They're not wrong there. So they did try to get this aggressively, I think sometimes like they really would hammer. So there wasn't a specific delusion that was given by the experts of why she did what she did. It was just this general culmination of all of her delusional thinking. Like none of them narrowed it down to one specific delusion. That is accurate. Okay.
The question. And we tried very hard to sort of narrow the scope. I want to know when she was in that room, what she was suffering from. I want to know her state of mind at that time, because it is whether she was operating under the compulsion of a delusion at the moment she committed the act, at the time of the crime. There are tons of people in this world who have had delusions or are mentally ill and do not meet the legal definition of insanity. So we need to know, was she suffering from the compulsion of a delusion? What was that particular delusion, and was it connected with the act that she committed? And when we talk about that, it's like if she has a delusion about, there being 169,000 people in the world, what does it have to do with killing Hannah? Those two things are not connected. So there was a lot of religious stuff, a lot of paranoia, a lot of things about, my parents are being watched by the CIA or are the CIA. None of that has anything to do with her motivation and her act of killing Hannah. And that is why in the questioning of all of these experts, I focused very clearly on what were her delusions that related to Hannah? What were her delusions that related to why she killed this baby?
And the only one that might get them there is the sin one. But even the sin one, to me, one of the experts said that was Benyamin Brian, that was his nickname and that he was the one saying that Chloe was sin and Hannah was sin, and that Chloe was imparting her sin into so that's the only one that might get close. But yeah.
That were connected to the victim and connected to the act.
Yeah.
Every other delusion, ignore it. It is meaningless under the law. The third prong that has to be present, and this is very important, the delusion has to be to a fact that, if true, would have justified the act committed by the accused. What does that mean?
So an example of that, and please don't, but an example of that would be if the voice in her head said that, that doing this would save the rest of the family or something like that would have to be, it would have to be something specific like that. And none of that was present. None of that was there.
Justification under Georgia law is basically Georgia's self-defense laws. The delusion she was suffering under has to relate to the particular delusion, has to relate to the act she committed, and the delusion has to be as to a fact that if we assumed it was true, it would justify the act. Or
Somebody's mic is on. Okay. So this is the second time somebody's cleared their voice. So I just want y'all to know it's not me. Okay. I'm not clearing my voice. So sometimes we have to laugh a little. Okay. Anybody that's new here, welcome. Sometimes like these cases are hard and sometimes we need to just laugh a little. Okay. Just a little. We're going to get back into it. This is very serious.
permit her to act in self-defense. I'll give you an example of one that would. If she was in that room with Hannah and she believed that Hannah morphed into a demon right in front of her and was about to kill her,
Yeah.
and she picked up the knife and stabbed Hannah in self-defense, that would be a delusion, if true, that would justify the act, because she would have believed she was in immediate danger of receiving death or serious bodily injury from that baby. And under the self-defense laws of the state of Georgia, if we assume that delusion was true, she would be justified in defending herself. That was not the nature of her delusions. None of them. And we asked every single witness, did she ever say anything about being afraid of Hannah? Did she ever say anything about Hannah being a threat to her or anyone else? Did she ever say anything about needing to defend herself against Hannah? Because that third prong of delusional compulsion requires that if we assume the delusion is true, it has to legally justify her acts. She has to be acting in self-defense if we believe whatever is going on in her head. And no matter how crazy the things were that were going on in her head, not a single shred of evidence has come before you that she ever believed Hannah was a threat to her. And we know that regardless of whether she was having delusions in that room or not, she was not acting in defense of herself or others and was not protecting herself or others from that baby. What we know is that what she has told everybody is that she was more motivated by wanting out of the situation or wanting to save Hannah. That is the opposite of justification and self-defense. She didn't view Hannah as a threat at all. And the defense pointed out in this case, well, isn't it true that she was holding the baby's hand in the body cam footage? That's a fact that is helpful to the state because it clearly demonstrates she's not threatened by this baby. She's not afraid of Hannah. Whatever is going on in her mind, she doesn't feel like she has to defend herself against Hannah. Maybe she saw this as a mercy killing. Maybe she was just desperate. But there is absolutely no evidence that this was an act of justification, self-defense based on what delusion was in her mind. Justification under the law is when she reasonably believed that she had to use that force in order to prevent serious bodily injury or death from Hannah. Or whether she believed that she had to prevent the commission of a forcible felony by this baby. There's no evidence of that. None.
So she is a phenomenal speaker. Okay. Like, I don't know if she memorizes, I don't know if she practices her talk. I don't know if she was in Toastmasters, but like, she is a great speaker in general, I think.
She does not meet the definition of criminal insanity based upon delusional compulsion. Because if she was suffering under delusions when she was in that room, the only delusions related to needing to save Hannah, not to Hannah being a threat that would justify her actions under the law. Delusional compulsion does not apply in this case. The judge is going to tell you that your verdict should be a true verdict. It's one more place in the law where the word true comes in. And a trial is about the pursuit of the truth. It is according to the laws and the evidence as you find it to be. But the judge is going to expressly tell you that you are not to show favor or sympathy to any party. The judge is going to expressly tell you you cannot base your verdict on sympathy. And I think it is important to highlight that you have to look at the facts and the evidence and the law objectively, because there are things about Ms. Driver that are pretty sympathetic. There are things about the situation that she got herself into that are kind of terrible. But the law does not allow you to make decisions about the outcome of this case because you feel sorry for anyone. The law does not allow you to base your verdict on sympathy. So what I ask of you in that regard is when you go back to the jury room, think, do I feel sorry for her for any particular thing? Take your moment, feel sorry for her, and then set that aside. And instead base your decisions on the objective facts and the law, because you've taken an oath and you have a duty to follow the law, and the law expressly tells you you cannot make your decision based on that. Because every victim of crime deserves that treatment. Hannah deserves that. She deserves the objective and fair application of the law and the objective and fair assessment of the facts. That is the law that governs your decision. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more law, but I tried to highlight the things that I think point most directly to the issues before you. After the defense has their opportunity to close, I'm going to come back before you and I'm going to help you apply that law to the evidence that we heard in this case.
So I think Chloe has had a really strong defense team, and I think the defense is going to have a really strong argument as well. I think the cross-examination of some of the witnesses went better with the defense than it did for the prosecution at some times. And so I don't know what this jury is going to find. I will definitely cover the verdict and answer any questions you all have once it comes out, but let's get into the defense's closing. I have until 7 p.m. And so I think we have enough time to get through the defense. I'm probably not going to get to the rebuttal of the state. All right. Like that's somebody's computer. Like that wasn't me. Like all these noises in my ear. I try to keep the noises down. I'll admit it when it's me. None of these noises are me. We might be having technical difficulties. Okay, so I want us to prepare ourselves. Their defense is that Chloe lost it, and she's a loving mother, and so I just want y'all to be prepared for, and that she never would have wanted to do what she did. Sorry, my bad. All right, there we go.
Good afternoon. As I told you in the beginning of this case would be difficult to listen to. We also told you from the beginning we had no dispute whatsoever about the facts as to what happened to Hannah Driver on December 8th of 2020. We all agree that the events that occurred that day are nothing short of a tragedy. Ms. Driver never denied that she didn't harm Hannah Nicole Driver on that day. There's also no dispute that she stabbed herself in the neck over 5 times and once in the chest to try to kill herself. We also told you from the beginning, we're not going to argue about anything related to the facts of this case. This case has always been about Hannah and Chloe's mental state at the time of the crime. That is it. It is clear from the evidence that has been submitted to you that both the state and the defense have shown very clearly Ms. Driver was suffering from severe mental illness at the time of the crime, She was suffering from delusions telling her that she needed to die. There's evidence that she had documented mental health history prior to being involved with Mr. Joyce. There's eyewitness testimony about her condition and the subsequent deterioration in the months leading up to this tragedy. There's evidence that she had been seeking help, communicating to those immediately around her that she was getting worse.
That's true.
And she could not resist those compulsions. She could not distinguish right from wrong. Now, I would agree with the state that they put up a lot of evidence in this case related to Hannah's death. The ER doctor, the medical examiner, crime lab, all of that. All things that we never once disputed. In fact, we spent, I think, 45 minutes one day about listening to the testimony about fingerprints on a knife. It didn't even have anything to do with this case. There were no fingerprints on the knife. We weren't even disputing the fingerprints or the knife. We've never disputed any of that. We've never disputed cause of death. We've never disputed how law enforcement initially responded to this, or any of the subsequent investigation that occurred in this case. See, in most cases, there's a factual dispute between the state and the defense as to the physical acts involved in a case.
All right. So, Gina, did Chloe have superficial or deep self? So this was not she ended up having to go to the ICU, and she had to have a tracheotomy. So like she had significant wounds. And if you look at her, there's a big scar from where she did right here. And somebody clarified that it was a paring knife. And thank goodness she grabbed the one that she did, because if she had grabbed a different type of knife, she might have died. I think Jerry had good knives. Because what I mean by good, so y'all know I used to sell Cutco, and I think because of the type of knife she grabbed, no, don't do these things. Okay, I'm not going to say what I'm going to say, but just I think she survived, and I'm glad that she survived. It would have been tragic for everybody, but she's going to be responsible for this. Yeah, it's a thinner, and so a paring knife is meant to, I think it's deboning things. Well, I don't know. I think you use it to, like, it's a very precise one. And but once again, she did not intend to survive. I don't think she did. I don't think she did at all.
And the mental intent, never been an issue with this case.
But that doesn't mean that she was legally insane at the time, because not intending to live would actually mean that you understand the wrongful, like that you, yeah, and you did it anyway. Like I don't know that this meets the legal criteria, but we'll see.
The only question has always been why. It has been about what led us to this deep, dark place. It has always been about Chloe Driver being a young, naive individual with a pre-existing mental health condition that had been previously undiagnosed, mostly based on her age. It has always been about the years of abuse, the coercive control, and living in this cult mentality that exacerbated these mental illnesses. All the experts agree. Ms. Driver was suffering from severe mental illnesses and delusions prior to, leading up to, and on December the 8th of 2020. You also heard from witnesses that described her and had observed that very same behavior well before that day and on that day as well. There's been evidence to show that she was in the throes of a severe mental health crisis during that 2-month period. There has been no evidence presented by anybody that this was an isolated snap or something that she is faking to achieve a particular result.
Yeah. So I wasn't saying that she picked that one because I'm glad that I don't think she knew much about knives, which is good. Like I don't think she knew much about them. I don't think. But I don't think she meant to survive. She locked the door. I think the state is probably going to get to that on, she put barriers in place. And
3 experts told you that. As I told you when I stood here before you in opening statements, I anticipated that they were going to present this case in a manner to draw at your raw initial emotions and hope that you would make those decisions based on those emotions. They presented this case in a manner in which they wanted you to ignore the evidence regarding her mental illness, her abuse, and all of the players involved in this case, and the realities of what goes on in that cult. They tried to paint this picture that this was just a group of wacky individuals with weird religious beliefs, that they were a peaceful, loving, polygamous family with some wacky religious beliefs. Not the case at all. Jason Spillers gave you a peek into their belief system. After over a week's worth of evidence, it is clear that everyone in law enforcement, everyone, including law enforcement, the experts, medical staff, people who were around her, and even the strangers that encountered Ms. Driver during this time, there is overwhelming evidence that she was severely mentally ill.
I'll give you that.
We have given you several examples of documented red flag events that occurred prior to that date that set the scene for what ultimately happened. Think about the incident involving Sandra Torres. Think about when Benyamin took Hannah from Chloe Thanksgiving Day of 2020. Watch that video she made when she had to go back to get her daughter. The evidence shows that her condition deteriorated, the delusions not only continued, but got worse collectively over time, all building up to that day. We know that her mental state was broken. She was seeing things, she was hearing things, and the delusions were telling her over and over again, she needed to die. Over and over and over again. Think about the pictures I showed you in the beginning of this case. The ones of her at 16, the ones of her in the summer leading up to this event. Ultimately, right before the event, where you can see where she is at that particular point in time. You can see the despair, you can see the stress, and you can see the mental illness in her eyes. See, there were signs that she was experiencing these delusions leading up to and on the day of the incident. There was discussions about death. She was seeing things associated with knives that she attributed special meaning to her because of that delusion. The 12 tribes, the dirty shirt. All of these delusions included the belief that she was sin. She was passing that sin on to her daughter.
So they did say like that it was a sign that it was time now. Like that was something that was stated. I don't know.
She needed to die, and Hannah was an extension of herself and her sin. She believed that Hannah was so connected to her and part of her that when she breastfed, she was imprinting and downloading all of herself into Hannah. She was experiencing these delusions in her mind that made her believe over and over again that she needed to kill herself and die. Based on her delusion regarding Hannah, she was thinking if she left behind her child, it would be a continuation of her sin and her false belief in that delusion that she was responsible for everything bad in the world. She needed to commit suicide. The act of suicide is what was driven by these delusions. It was not because of jealousy or anything related to Benyamin Ben Michael. Not at all. There's no evidence of that. The state told you in their opening that they were going to show that Ms. Driver was not mentally ill. I think they said crazy in air quotes. That Ms. Driver killed her daughter out of jealousy and some desire to be the only wife. She was not delusional. She just subscribed to some wacky religious conspiracy theories. And she was voluntarily part of this group and free to leave whenever she wanted to. There's been no evidence of that whatsoever. Let's talk about each one of these arguments and break them down. I'm not even going to address the assertion that they made in opening that she wasn't crazy. The evidence on its own speaks to that. There's no evidence that this event had anything to do with jealousy. There's no evidence that she killed her daughter because she wanted Benyamin to herself. The statements she made to law enforcement and hospital staff are not motives. She told Detective Cruz that she wanted a normal family. That's not an abnormal wish, but it's not a motive for murder. How does killing herself and Hannah achieve the result of having Mr. Benmichael to herself? Or it's not logical. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not supported by the facts. She did not attempt to harm any of the other wives. She didn't attempt to harm Mr. Benmichael. If she wanted to have him to herself, wouldn't she have gotten rid of the competition? If she was in her right mind, wouldn't she have taken steps to remove the others from the relationship? That seems to be a more logical response. Seems to me that she would have.
Please just leave. Like, don't. Oh, I don't have it plugged in. I can't play my don't do crimes. Don't do crimes. Don't do crimes.
Taken steps to stop those interfering with her wishes, not killed the child or herself. That argument defies logic. Jason also told us here there were no jealousy issues whatsoever within that group. Never any issues with Chloe acting out.
He also said that he saw nothing but kindness from Benyamin and that he never put his, like, I don't trust Jason. Are we going to hedge our defense on Jason? I wouldn't trust him to get me a glass of water.
Towards other women in the group, or that she made any demands to have Mr. Benmichael to herself. Their own witness told you that. They were a happy family. They sat around talking about their feelings. They spent months trying to care for Chloe. There was no lack of attention. Killing Hannah and killing herself does not get Chloe attention. It does not get her alone with her husband. This was in no way a passive suicide attempt. If they had evidence to the contrary of how Jason portrayed their relationship in their life, state could have presented that to you. Ask yourselves why they did not. The state also argued that Chloe is free to leave at any time and not victim of domestic violence. And because she had access to money, she could come and go as she pleased, leave anytime. They argued she could leave him with her daughter at any time. That argument goes against every ounce of training everyone sitting at that table has ever gone about the domestic violence cycle. There is evidence that Chloe had visible hearing injuries on at least 2 different occasions. They know from their everyday practice that victims engage in contact with their abusers despite knowing that they shouldn't be. They know their victims continue to contact their abusers, even when court orders are in place telling them not to do it. They continue to contact their abusers despite knowing what those people are capable of and go back to them repeatedly. They know that victims, in their experience, take steps to plan an escape, but they don't always execute that plan. They are trying to ignore the facts that are supported by their evidence that Chloe Driver was a victim of domestic violence and she was trying to leave and deal with that mental illness at the same time. They refuse to see her as a victim in this case because it just doesn't fit their narrative. I'm also just going to say this about domestic violence at the hands of Benyamin. Chloe was not his first, not his only, and certainly won't be his last victim. Gabriella told you how hard it was for her to break herself away from that relationship, both physically and emotionally. She told you about how controlling he was, the physical abuse she endured, the threats he made to her about leaving and never seeing her child again.
I hope that she tells the jury how they should interpret the law and how this case does fit the law. Because the prosecution said, this is why, because this is the law y'all are going to have to apply. And this is why we think this doesn't apply. I don't know if I hope that she gets to that, but we'll see.
You got to hear about that experience directly. You got to hear about the abuse, the control, the emotional connection, her feelings of worthlessness, and the difficulty from separating from him with a child. You heard her tell you that despite being subjected to all of those things, she would leave and come back to her abuser. It fits within the cycle of violence. It fits what happened in this case as well. You heard her tell you that it finally took her getting the strength and confidence and belief in herself and having the assistance of her family members to leave for good. And she never looked back. And what may seem relatively straightforward to us is inexplainable about why you would go back. You heard Detective Cruz here on cross-examination tell us in further detail just how hard it is for those types of relationships, especially with a child, to get away from their abuser. She talked to us about how it's not uncommon for women to return to their abuser, remain in contact, or try to find ways to leave, but just don't have the strength to do that. Both Gabriella and Chloe experienced significant trauma bonds with Mr. Benyamin. They both kept going back to what they knew, what they could expect, instead of moving forward into the unknown. That doesn't even take into account the emotional connection or underlying mental illness. Now, the state's probably going to tell you that whatever happened to Gabriella just doesn't matter. It's not relevant to what happened with Chloe Driver or her mental state. It is 100% relevant because Gabriella endured the exact same treatment and she sat here and told you about it. It was exactly the same as that was described to evaluators, to law enforcement, all by Chloe Driver. These two individuals never talked about their own experiences with each other. Gabrielle told you that she had one contact with her where she tried to explain some of the things she endured and realized that she wasn't getting through to Chloe. Detective Cruz was the one that contacted Gabriella 6 days after this crime had occurred because she knew exactly what she was dealing with based on her experience and following the evidence of their investigation. The control, the power, and the degradation of two women by Benyamin. Thankfully, Gabriella was able to escape and did not have pre-existing mental health issues. Thank goodness she was able to protect her child. In the presentation of this case, the state has always minimized what has happened to Chloe leading up to this. They didn't want to discuss her self-inflicted injuries. They didn't put any pictures of that up in evidence. We did. They didn't want you to talk about any of that. They didn't want to discuss the controlling and abusive relationship. They want you to believe that none of it matters in the context of this case. They want you to ignore her cries for help, her behavior leading up to this, the reports about the things she was saying to these people, and her attempts to leave on November 25th and November 26th. Now keep in mind, this case was investigated from the very beginning by Detective Cruz with regard to Ms. Driver's mental state and from the perspective that Chloe was a victim. As Detective Cruz began this investigation, she immediately suspected there was a lot more to the story than she was getting from these cult members. Long before Chloe could even have an opportunity to think of a defense. She sat in that hospital. She hadn't talked to anybody. Detective Cruz had already interviewed everybody. And based on that, you heard Detective Cruz tell you she had contacted other people. She had sought those Asheville police departments. She knew what she was dealing with. You watched videos where Chloe told you that she had been hurt and where Chloe told Detective Cruz about her black eye. She told Detective Cruz about her paranoia, her state of mind, and you saw the videos of her saying she wanted to die with that baby. Based on that experience with law enforcement with DV victims, she continued to investigate that case. She found additional women, she found those police reports, and more evidence of what that world that Chloe was living in. Now, you also heard from Jason Spillers, and that was quite a treat. He was able to paint a picture of this group in two very different ways. First, he was able to tell you about how he knew Chloe, how he knew her to be a loving, caring mother who loved Hannah and did everything for her. He knew her before she decompensated and spent so much time with the group that he knew exactly who Chloe was.
Okay, so I want to try to be able to get to the state because I'm hearing that the states was good. Okay, so we're going to speed it up just a little. So if anybody wants to learn how to slow it down, if I end up going too fast, especially on replay, there should be like a little, it looks like a little toolbar, and you just click on that and you can adjust your volume and all that good stuff. Okay, or but you can adjust the speed. So I'm going to 1.25.
What she was like. He told you about the different times he saw her, the changes he noticed, and even talking to Benyamin about getting her treatment. He told you that the group spent the better part of the last 2 months leading up to December 8th of 2020 taking care of Chloe. He told us about her episodes and how she would have these episodes or go catatonic and have no idea what had just happened. That there were dramatic changes just in the time that he knew her. And it wasn't jealousy. It was mental illness. Secondly, I don't know if he intended to do this or not. He painted a very clear picture for you of what life was really like in this group. You could see how he idolized Benyamin. He endorsed all of his beliefs and the life that came with it. It was clear that he and Benyamin viewed women as property, as lesser individuals. He told us that the women are subservient and that they were not capable of having the same conversations as men. I think he used the words, they should be out frolicking and dancing with the babies. He told us that, yep, Benyamin set the standard, and that is what everybody had to live by. He tried to paint a picture of this wild alternative reality that no one was buying about polygamy. We know that he disputed that incident with Sandra Torres. Think about this. If he punched a total stranger for attempting to help Chloe that day, can you imagine what these men do to these women behind closed doors? If Jason is that crazy, can you imagine how his leader is? Ask yourself why they did not let you hear from Benyamin. They didn't call him because they know exactly who he is. The facts of this case are undisputed, so let's get down to the experts. Now, we've all heard from 3 different experts in this case. They all agree she was severely mentally ill in the months leading up to the event. They all agree she was suffering from delusions at the time leading up to this. Dr. Garrett and Dr. Ballard both diagnosed her with schizoaffective bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. We heard this morning that Dr. Zahn did not offer any individual diagnosis. That's just her approach to this. But she told you today that she didn't disagree with those. In fact, she agreed with them, maybe a slight variation. They all utilize the same resources and collateral information to conduct their evaluations. Both Dr. Garrett and Dr. Ballard told you that even outside of Chloe's self-report, the information provided among those sources of information was consistent and independently verified. Those doctors did not believe she was malingering or presenting in any way to achieve a certain result. The experts have told us that these delusions are defined as a fixed false belief that someone holds on to, even when the evidence shows that there is no way they can be real. They cannot be explained outside of mental illness. They are so unusual that they cannot be explained other than disordered thinking. That delusional compulsion that Ms. Roper was talking about is defined as if that delusion had been real, it would have justified the conduct. Her delusions in this case were not religious in nature. She believed everyone was out together. She believed she had special powers. She believed she had magical thinking about things that she thought she did that impacted the world, that she was receiving specific messages directed at her. Those messages came both in auditory and visual hallucinations, but also those delusions of reference that were referenced by both of the doctors. Delusions are not things that are in line with a person's culture, and everybody knows them to be false. They are not extreme religious beliefs. A delusion that drove Ms. Driver to the point we're at today was the one that you heard from Dr. Garrett and Dr. Ballard and Dr. Zom, was that she needed to die. That is not part of any religious belief system.
The problem with that one, my problem with that one is one of the traits of like there can be a lot of attempts with borderline personality disorder. And I've mentioned to you all, BPD is a very treatable condition. I use DBT skills training. Often the clients I work with that have this diagnosis, they often have complex trauma. They often have very difficult relationships with family. If that was the delusion, so the delusion was that Chloe needed to die? Ugh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we get there legally, but we'll see. I'm not a lawyer. We're just watching.
Those are not agreements for participation in any cult. All the experts agree on this. Now, I know you all sat here and paid attention to all of these experts, and I'm not going to go through everything that they've all talked about, but here's what I want to talk about with respect to each one of those. Dr. Garrett told us that the signs and the depth of her mental illness was ever present, that they existed before her relationship, and that she had been experiencing delusions since adolescence. That's important. That contradicts the state saying that
So the delusions that doctor talked about was like magical thinking. And to me, some of the delusions or like that she could hear what other people were thinking, some of that could be consistent with borderline. I did not evaluate her. I can't say whether it was or wasn't, but the delusions that they talked about in the teenage years. So a lot of teens think people are watching them, or like it was. I didn't get there personally, but it is what it is. Let's go.
She didn't experience delusions, that this is all made up. Dr. Garrett also told you that she was exhibiting those signs of those visual and auditory hallucinations, even after being medicated for over a year and a half. When she met her, she was still exhibiting those signs of that delusional thinking. She was still having issues with suicidal ideation and thoughts that she needed to die. She told us it was clear she was experiencing emotional distress regarding the situation and confusion about the moral and ethical appropriateness of her delusions. She said, Ms. Driver said, I was at peace with how it was supposed to be. You heard that Dr. Garrett believed that she felt she needed to take her life because of her delusions, and everything in the world was telling her, in her mind, that's what she needed to do. Not just because of the delusions about sin, but because of all of those delusions of reference that she was seeing on a daily basis. That she was being told she needed to die. She would see a light bulb, she could see a knife, she could see all of these things that to you and I would mean nothing. But because of the disordered thinking and those delusions, it was feeding into her thought process and delusions. She told us that these delusions were above and beyond any religious teachings or anything that Mr. Ben Michael had ever told Chloe. Religious beliefs don't tell you need to die. She also told you if you take someone who is vulnerable, who is already delusional, and bring them into this type of scenario and start teaching them crazy stuff, you are teaching them something that will only lead to an increase in their problems. Dr. Garrett also told us that Chloe started out as a very vulnerable young lady who was already delusional to begin with, having these thoughts. She also told us somebody that has a personality disorder, mood disorder, and substance abuse was her baseline. These things existed prior to her ever getting involved in this relationship, and that those circumstances only made this scenario worse. She also told us to think about this as not a particular moment in time. Ms. Gropper tried to ask her about the dirty shirt as a trigger. And Dr. Garrett quickly corrected her and said, no, you have to consider all of these signs. And she went through and she listed those signs. She told us that we have to look at this as a culmination of events, not something as a trigger. Now, Dr. Ballard came here yesterday and told us a lot of the same information that Dr. Garrett did. She diagnosed the defendant with the same illnesses and, in her opinion, believed the acts were driven by that thought process. She told us that some of the things that the state seems to believe were deliberate acts or tries to persuade you to believe were things that she premeditated and thought out in her head before doing it, are actually acts in support of that delusional compulsion. They were acts that were in her mind to finish out what she was being told to do, that she needed to not die. Getting a knife and locking the door are acts that are can be attributed to carrying out that delusion, is a way to act on that compulsion that kept telling her she needed to kill herself. That's an explanation that's rooted in science and in psychology. She told us that these people in delusional states can do everyday things and appear like it's normal. She also told us that these Google searches show that Miss Driver was attempting to resist acting on those compulsions to the best of her ability. She sought ways out. She sought ways to get help. She was also able to explain to you from a psychological standpoint that the statements made by Chloe to law enforcement after the incident don't necessarily mean anything when you're talking about the mental state at the time of the crime. She also talked about the jail calls and continuing communication that Chloe had with Mr. Ben Michael, and explained it in the context of not only Chloe's mental health issues, but in the context of her experiences while she lived in that relationship. The state played you a few phone calls in this particular case, all including her mother. What it tells us, based on those calls that you listened to, is the true depths of her mental illness and her entanglement to him. The jail calls you listened to still show that even when she was incarcerated, she was still controlled and manipulated by him. Notice how they didn't play any of the conversations with Mr. Ben Michael.
Could they have, though? Legally, and I'm not a lawyer, because I was wondering if they didn't introduce them because she didn't testify. So Chloe didn't testify and Z wasn't there. So I wasn't sure if they could introduce those. I don't know.
She also told us that people who are mentally ill, who have not received therapy, who have not been properly medicated, make irrational choices. The jail is not a therapeutic environment, and that to treat all of Chloe's issues, a great deal of treatment was needed, not just medication, to break that bond. Her testimony, Dr. Zom testified today, really didn't dispute any of the other two doctors in this case. She told you that Chloe was suffering from the same type of delusions and mental illness in the months and leading up to this event. All the doctors are consistent with that understanding of her severe mental illness. They all agree that it was untreated, and based on their diagnoses, would only get worse the longer it remained untreated. Each of those doctors agreed that the delusions that Ms. Driver experienced grew more and more pointed to the idea that she needed to kill herself and ultimately her child. Dr. Zom also agreed that the specific delusions that Chloe was experiencing on December the 8th culminated in the final delusion regarding the dirty shirt, and that was a sign she was unable to overcome. Now, I just want to talk briefly a little bit about the treatment of the experts in this case by the district attorney's office, and I think that this needs to be discussed.
So he's nomadic, and I think he avoids the courts and the court system. I don't know that he would have responded to a subpoena. I don't know that he would have. So the question was Brian Z excluded for some reason? Are they married? I don't believe they're legally married. He did these contracts with the women that probably aren't legal. Like, I don't think he would pay to go to the courthouse and do all of that. He sounds like a grifter in my personal thoughts and opinions, but all right.
Mr. Fogus spent a lot of time yesterday with Dr. Ballard, trying to emphasize some perceived bias as a defense expert. Neither Dr. Ballard, nor Dr. Zom, nor Dr. Garrett have any interest in this case other than providing you an expert professional opinion regarding her mental state at the time the crimes were committed. They have all told you that their roles in these cases is not based on reaching a particular result. No defense attorney ever contacts them or contacts any expert and asks them, hey, we need you to do a particular thing for us. At the end of the day, all of the doctors who shared all the same title and the same qualifications, in essence, reached the same general ideas in this particular case. If any of these evaluators believed that she did not suffer from mental illness or had these delusions, none of us would be here today. This is just not how these evaluations work. Now, I think it's important when we talk about Dr. McClendon.
So remember, Jason's incarcerated. So they physically brought him here. If Jason wasn't incarcerated, I don't know that he would have come in. Does that make sense? Like, Jason is incarcerated and they transferred him so that he could be there to testify. He's in federal prison. Okay.
That you all realize we called her as a witness in our case. The state didn't call her. She became involved in this case because she is employed by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. She works for the state. She was provided all of the information in this case that the state could give her to review prior to talking to Ms. Driver. Whether or not Ms. Cropper or Mr. Fogus want to acknowledge it, she was their expert. And their expert agreed with Dr. Zom and Dr. Ballard.
That's kind of true.
She worked for the state. We didn't involve her in this case. We had no choice in Dr. Garrett. See, in response to our evaluation, Ms. Cropper sent a referral to the Department of Behavioral Health. Now, granted, Ms. Cropper doesn't get to pick which particular forensic psychologist is assigned to evaluate a defendant. But in this case, the state's own expert, the one who conducted the evaluation on behalf of the state of Georgia, sat up here and told you similar things that Dr. Ballard came in here and told you. Did you see Mr. Fogus or Ms. Cropper attack Dr. Garrett personally when we called her as a witness? No. And she made very similar findings and told you about that here in court. If they didn't like any of the reports in this case, the state could have at any time in the last 3.5 years requested an evaluation by a doctor of their choice. I ask you this, would it have mattered? The answer to that question is no. They all agree she was severely mentally ill and suffering from these delusions. She needed to kill herself and her child. They just don't like that the experts don't align with their theory of this case. Now, the experts are hired to conduct an evaluation in the area of their expertise. They don't give you a particular result. It's not how the system works. Dr. Ballard told you she's done a lot of criminal responsibility evaluations, and maybe less than 10% of those evaluations have yielded an opinion of not guilty by reason of insanity. Dr. Garrett told you she works for the state of Georgia and testifies for both the state and the defense. And yet they came in here and told you similar things. If the Cherokee County District Attorney's Office believed that none of these doctors conducted a thorough and accurate assessment of Ms. Driver in the last 3.5 years, they could have done something about it. The state knows what we all know in this case, that if Chloe was in her right mind, she would never have killed that baby. If Chloe had gotten the help she needed, she would have never harmed her baby or herself. If Chloe had not been in an abusive, controlling relationship with a man more than twice her age, her already existing mental health issues could have been treated. There is absolutely no motive in this case to kill her daughter or herself. There is no reason other than what was related to those psychotic symptoms and delusions she was under on December 8th of 2020. It is now your job to set aside those emotions about the death of Hannah. The evidence shows at the time of the crime, she was not only suffering from delusions that were telling her she needed to die, that she didn't have the ability to distinguish right from wrong. While in this delusional state, the experts told us that everything in her mind was telling her that she needed to die. There's evidence that showed she tried to resist giving in to these thoughts. There is evidence that showed she did not, in these delusions and altered states of mind, she didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know what right from wrong. There is evidence to show that because of her delusions telling her that she and Hannah needed to die, that she was overmastered by the constant voices telling her, you need to die, in her head, and ultimately acted on them. All of this started with undiagnosed and untreated mental illness that resulted in a truly horrible, tragic act. Let me put a few things in perspective that may have helped prevent this from happening in the first place. If Benyamin, Sarah, and Jessica or Jason had gotten Chloe help instead of CBD, or ignoring the reality that was right before their eyes every day, Hannah may still be alive. If the Asheville Police Department had arrested Jason and Benyamin on November 25th for the incident where they assaulted Sandra Torres that day, Chloe may have been able to get away and get the help that she needed, and Hannah may be alive today. If Brian had not taken Hannah from Chloe on November 26th of 2020, when he found out her parents were coming to get them, it's fair to say that she might have been able to break away from that relationship if he hadn't left with her daughter. Chloe was never going to leave without her daughter. You heard testimony from Chloe's mom about how she had no idea about the extreme nature of this relationship until it was too late. They didn't have any idea about the mental health struggles. She didn't confide in them because he had convinced her that she couldn't trust her own parents. Every single day, her parents live with regrets and think about those what ifs. What if they had just tried harder? What if they had called the police? What if they had just taken Hannah? It replays in their mind over and over again. Her parents still say, if we had tried harder to get through to Chloe, Hannah may still be alive today. Look at all the times that Chloe was unable to address these significant mental health issues. Those failures led to a deep and darker mental state. They caused Chloe to lose her way as a mother to this child. To that end, I agree with the state. She failed in her ultimate responsibility to protect her child. But the failure of her motherly duties was caused entirely by her untreated mental health crisis. It is clear that but for that paranoia, her hallucinations and her delusions, Chloe loved her daughter. And she fought in every way she knew how, and in the circumstances she was in, to resist those delusions to kill herself and her child. But when those things kept happening to her over and over and over again, and were so pervasive in her mind, that's all she could see. She tried to fight it.
To me, she seemed more upset about Z to me than she has her daughter. And I don't know what the jury's going to see with all of this. I think there have been times that she has shown she's cried, like she has shown emotion and everything. It seems like she was more upset about Z and all of that, and my thinking looking from the outside.
She was voicing these concerns to everyone. She was telling these people, let me be with her. Help me, get me help. We can see it on December the 8th. We can see that she was having these delusions, beginning with the 12 tribes, associating the discussion that they were having that day about death as a sign that reinforced that earlier delusion. We talked about the paranoia that she experienced at Whole Foods, the delusion about that room in the house, and being alone, and that ultimate final delusion of the dirty shirt that overwhelmed her ability, and she gave in. Now, the court's going to give you instructions regarding the law for you to consider in this case. It is now your job to apply that law to the evidence that you have heard over the course of the last week. As Ms. Cropper kind of touched on briefly, you're going to be given a verdict form that allows you to decide this case in 4 different ways. The not guilty, guilty, guilty by mentally ill, or not guilty by reason of insanity. In order to find Chloe guilty of the charged offenses, you need to find that she committed the acts and that she had the required intent. And the state has to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge will charge you about what it means to be find someone beyond a reasonable doubt. The option of guilty but mentally ill does not yield the same results as a not guilty by reason of insanity. And I want you to keep that in your head. A finding of not guilty by reason of insanity, and the judge is going to give you an instruction on this, allows this court to maintain the custody and control over an individual for the evaluation and treatment of her mental health needs. And that can be indefinite. The law allows a person to be found not guilty by reason of insanity if they did not have the mental capacity to distinguish between right and wrong at the time of the crime. The law allows this because because of mental disease, she acted in such a way that that delusional compulsion overwhelmed and overmastered her will to resist. Now, we've all talked about the delusions and what delusional compulsion really is, but in this case, she was compelled to act in this manner because in her mind, she believed she was right. She believed if the facts were as she believed them to be in her head, she was right. The testimony you've heard in this case was that these delusions were directing her to die. There is evidence to show that she experiences these delusions of reference, these auditory and visual hallucinations, these command hallucinations, paranoia. You heard testimony that Chloe believed based on that delusion, she was downloading all of herself into Hannah and viewed her as an extension of herself. You heard Dr. Ballard tell you that the people with these type of disorders have a very difficult time distinguishing boundaries or when one person ends and another begins. Yep. You've heard testimony that people suffering from the same illnesses as Chloe are often unable to distinguish the boundaries. She didn't necessarily.
But they don't have to go out and do crimes. Is that like, I think it's like a big step. And that's why I talk about these things. Because once again, individuals with borderline personality disorder, the ones that I've seen, I've worked with them on setting healthy boundaries and being in healthy, stable relationships, choosing from their healing and not their pain, and addressing, identifying trauma bonds and codependent relationships, and, not managing explosive anger. Like we've worked on those things. And I do agree with the defense that Brian Z, this group was never going to let her get the mental health treatment that she needed.
Really know where Hannah began or ended. She didn't know where she began, where she ended. She viewed her in her mind as one unit. She was not going to leave behind any piece of her in this world to perpetuate that ongoing sin, which told her she needed to die. It is all part of the delusion. Now, the state began their opening statement and again today asking you for justice for Hannah. We agree. There is justice for Hannah in this case if you find her not guilty by reason of insanity. There is no doubt that our client committed these horrific acts. Never contested that. I want to be clear, though, that in this case, justice looks different than what we're used to. Our society has certain ideas about mental illness and has created a very strong perception that mental illness is an excuse for someone who commits a crime. The law recognizes that severely mentally ill people cannot perform the required criminal intent to commit a crime. The law allows you to find Chloe not guilty by reason of insanity if you believe at the time of the crime she was suffering from mental illness and that she did not have the ability to distinguish right from wrong. You're also allowed to find her not guilty by reason of insanity if you believe that due to her mental illness, she was suffering from a delusional compulsion that overmastered her will to resist committing the act. We know that Miss Driver was in a delusional state. She was confused as to what was right and what was wrong, and resisted acting on those delusions for a long time. In that type of mindset, in the throes of a severe psychotic episode, there is no way she had the ability to distinguish right from wrong at that time. And she was left untreated. And she got worse and worse. Now, Ms. Robert talked to you a little bit about the delusional compulsion part of that, but we know from the evidence in this case that she was severely mentally ill, that she was suffering from delusions that compelled her to act in a particular manner. That if right, that would have been right if she had believed, if they had been as she believed them to be. If you find that Ms. Driver, based on those delusions, that she believed her actions were right, and as she believed them to be, she would be justified. The evidence has been clear that she needed to kill herself, and by extension, Hannah. She could not separate her identities at that particular time. Now, I want to tell you, suicide in and of itself is not a crime. In her mind, she was being told to kill herself and any part of her. Her intention, based on those delusions, is to follow through on that. And the delusions were telling her to commit suicide. Those right actions in her mind are what led to those events. As I told you, this case has always been about the why. And I think you just need to think about this in the context of how we got here today. Chloe was a young, naive individual with pre-existing mental health issues. She already walked in with that baseline to this relationship. She suffered years of abuse, coercive control, and a cult mentality. We've heard about, she asked for help, she cried for help and attempted to leave. We've heard that all the experts agree that she was suffering from severe mental health issues, and that untreated, undiagnosed individuals treating those type of illnesses get worse over time. They just don't go away.
Okay, so I want to skip ahead because the judge, I think there was a jury question, and so I want to watch this part right here. Okay, so let's get into the jury question. Oh, maybe this is the instruction. So maybe this is the, okay, these are the instructions to the jury, I think. I think that's the jury instruction. That's what that looks like. Let me play from here and see what this is.
Just want to review that. You'll raise your hand. Okay, 94 and 201. All right.
So they had a question pretty fast. Like I think they were deliberating. Okay, so the court did a break. I don't know. Like we're just gonna watch it, see what happens.
Sometimes I say that being an alternate juror is like being first runner-up in a beauty pageant.
Alternates.
You don't get to serve unless somebody.
Okay, so they pick the alternates. Okay, I'm just gonna keep playing.
Ahead of you number where they can arrived at and be excused, but you will.
So they excuse the alternates. I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And then they were going through some things, I think checking the exhibits. Okay. And then I think that might be it. Okay, so if there was a jury question, I did not see it. I saw it in the chat somewhere that there was a jury question, so I am not sure. I need to go feed my kiddo, okay? I heard the question had to do with I don't know. So I don't know. We will see what happens with this. Some people are believing that they started deliberating about 4:45. And I don't expect anything today. I don't expect anything today. The jury has a lot to consider. We will see how long they take. I think I saved a question. I think I had a question. I think this was it. So the defense is saying Chloe was experiencing command hallucinations. How do clinicians distinguish thoughts from auditory hallucinations when evaluating clients? And so I often a thought is going to sound like your voice, or like auditory hallucinations they come from the person hears it in their head, but it sounds like it's coming from the outside. It can be a male's voice. It can be a voice that doesn't sound like their own. I'm not sure if she was having command auditory hallucinations. I know that she said she was, but I don't know. I don't know if that was true. But those are some of the questions that I ask. A Rorschach test. That's how I was trained to distinguish psychosis. There's a lot of research and training on giving but sometimes for Rorschach in forensic settings, there can be a bunch of questions. There can be a bunch of stuff. And so often it doesn't always come up in that setting. I think I heard a forensic doctor on YouTube talking about that they would have wanted somebody to get a Rorschach. And so Yes, the prosecution did give a rebuttal. I need to go feed my kiddo. So the link to that is down in the description. So I need to head out. Court TV and Law and Crime, they were not allowed to have live chat. And so that's why the chat is closed on Law and Crime and also on Court TV. Any of their follow-up videos might have live comments, but there was a court order that restricted live comments. I truly wish I truly wish everybody the best in this case. This one was a really, really tough one. I will see y'all when we get a verdict. When a verdict comes in, I will probably do a quick stream where we talk about it. I answer y'all's questions, and we will kind of go from there. I hope y'all have a good one. Bye.